Chapter 3:13. Yen Zhaoge spoke slowly, but the meaning behind his words was not all that polite. It was not just the Sacred Sun clan. During the chaos of the decimating abyss earlier, other than the Sacred Sun clan, the Heavenly Thunder Hall had similarly been involved in launching the Anti-Sun Grand Formation to disrupt it. If not for guarding against infinite, boundless mountains' heaven-cleaving acts, this Lord of the Heavenly Thunder Hall, Shunli, would probably have come to Broad Creed Mountain as well, while Lin Tianfeng and the others had died. The fury of all of Broad Creed Mountain towards the Heavenly Thunder Hall was not much less than that of the Sacred Sun clan. Bald Shun, from what you have said, in my opinion, your Heavenly Thunder Hall and the Sacred Sun clan are the traitors of the 9 underworlds. Garbed in the clear Qi robe, Yuan Zhengfeng strode over in the direction of Shunli. My clan fought a bloody battle with the decimating abyss, finally exterminating them, and even successfully preventing the 9 underworlds from descending within my Broad Creed Mountain and the 8 Extremities world. In the course of the great battle, your Heavenly Thunder Hall and the Sacred Sun clan disrupted our clan's clear Qi grand formation together. Afterwards, you joined hands to attack us. What? Do you want to take revenge for decimating Abyss? To continue their unfinished business and let the 9 underworlds descend? Shun-Li gave a cold snort, and his aura instantly went far away. A Grand Elder and a first-seat elder of their clan, 2 heavyweights, along with a great number of other experts, had perished at Broad Creed Mountain. Not only would he be unable to take revenge, he would also have to flee. It was easy to imagine how depressed this Cyan Thunder Marshal Saint was feeling, but at this moment, he had no choice but to retreat. Not to mention that Shunli was well aware of some matters and had never forgotten them. Even if he had momentarily forgotten them, the battle between Yuan Zhengfeng and Huang Guanglia earlier would allow him to immediately recall them. Once upon a time, heaven's equal Yuan Zhengfeng was the strongest existence among his peers. While he was not renowned for being invincible like his disciple, Yan Di, suppressing his generation and looking down on all lifetimes, Yuan Zhengfeng had also created a legend of his own that year. Yuan Zhengfeng had stepped into the peak of the martial grandmaster stage, the transcending mortality stage, much earlier than his peers Huang Guanglia, Shunli, Yuan Tian, and Xian Dongping, not to mention the slightly younger Song Wuliang and Enqing Lin. Back then, when everyone was still young and had just started to rise to fame, Yuan Zhengfeng was the most outstanding one. He was also the one who was looked upon as the most likely to become a martial sage in the shortest time among those of the same generation. It was only because of his old injuries that Yuan Zhengfeng had remained in the transcendental realm all this time, which was why Huang Guanglia, Shunli, and the others had managed to catch up to him. Yuan Zhengfeng, who had wasted many years, had finally crossed that threshold and transcended mortality and entered sainthood. This immediately awakened many people's dusty memories. Of the previous 6 martial sages, aside from Old Man Mo, who was older and rarely fought, making it hard to determine his strength, the others were not a match for Yuan Zhengfeng at the same cultivation realm. The awe-inspiring Huang Guanglia had been fighting Yuan Zhengfeng for many years. When he was in the Grandmaster realm and Martial Grandmaster realm, he had never won. The number of times he had lost to Yuan Zhengfeng could not be counted on one hand. When the Lord of the Heavenly Thunder Hall, Shunli, had clashed with Yuan Zhengfeng back then at the Martial Grandmaster realm, he had also suffered a crushing defeat. Today, even though Yuan Zhengfeng had just stepped into the Saint realm, it was still difficult for Shunli to face him head-on. Moreover, Yuan Zhengfeng still had the sacred artifact, the clear Qi robe, accompanying him. If it was said that after leaving Broad Creed Mountain, even without the great sun heaven-measuring ruler, Huang Guanglia would still dare to battle Yuan Zhengfeng without a sacred artifact in hand, Shunli could only turn and flee. While Shanli retreated, Yuan Zhengfeng did not let him have it easy, directly pressuring over with a heavenly broad creed palm. In the distance, in the direction where Shanli was, the skies seemed to have collapsed, and the horizon seemed to have distorted. A muffled groan came from afar. Shun Li did not accept the battle at all. His body transformed into a bolt of lightning, forcefully enduring his injuries as he swiftly retreated. Shun Li flew all the way, passing through the territory of the East Heaven region, where Broad Creed Mountain's martial practitioners had already shrunk earlier. After exiting the Earth domain, the Heavenly Thunder Hall martial practitioners had galloped here. Lin Tianfeng and the others had gone to Broad Creed Mountain in the Central Heaven region, and there were others who had established a base of operations here. But at this moment, these people watched in astonishment as their hall master flew past them. Rumbling thunder light wrapped around all of them. He didn't stop and continued flying in the direction of the Earth domain, passing through it and returning to the Thunder Dominion. Lin Zhou was amongst them, and when he saw there was only Shun Li by himself, he couldn't help but be astounded. "Grand Master, my father and martial ancestral uncle you." Shun Li's face was livid, and he did not say a word. Lin Zhou's face instantly turned deathly pale. He composed himself, sucking in a deep breath, wanting to ask further. However, looking at that terrifying expression on Shun Li's face, Lin Zhou opened his mouth, yet was unable to utter a sound. Grand Master should have just suffered a small loss, and is in a bad mood, thus looking like this. Lin Zhou thought to himself, nothing will happen to father and the others. Fighting Broad Creed Mountain, not having taken it down in the end, losing face. Lin Zhou gritted his teeth, but the Sacred Sun clan's Guanglia has already left seclusion. With the great sun, heaven-measuring ruler in hand, and Grand Master also restraining infinite boundless mountains' heaven-cleaving axe, how could they not be able to take down Broad Creed Mountain, who had just been heavily injured by the decimating abyss? Jade Sea City and Turbid Wave Pavilion have also been restrained by the Flame Devils on the East Sea. It would be impossible for them to traverse the Earth domain to help. Lin Zhou thought, perhaps it is because the Sacred Sun clan obtained the clear Qi robe that Grand Master is so flustered and exasperated. This is the most likely scenario. If Broad Creed Mountain was destroyed, with even their sacred artifact, the clear Qi robe, also falling into the hands of the Sacred Sun clan, the Sacred Sun clan's momentum would truly be hard to resist, showing signs of sweeping through the entire world. At that time, the Heavenly Thunder Hall might have to make peace with Infinite Boundless Mountain, joining hands with Jade Sea City. It was to the extent that even Turbid Wave Pavilion would find it hard to continue remaining neutral, having no choice but to give up on its neutral stance. Otherwise, they too would have to look up to the Sacred Sun clan. Lin Zhou kept comforting himself. However, after having returned to the Heavenly Thunder Hall and having calmed down, Shun Li held an urgent discussion with the other longtime elders who had stayed behind. News from the outside world had also broken Lin Zhou's hopes. This thunder, rumbling young master who was already gradually revealing his flair as the number one of the Heavenly Thunder Hall's younger generation, shut himself in a room by himself. Anyone who passed by the door of his room could feel the oppressive and violent feeling, as if a thunderstorm was brewing. Even Yen Shan, who had always been at odds with Lin Zhou, did not dare to approach Lin Zhou at this moment. After learning of this, the bigwigs of the Heavenly Thunder Hall all sighed. One day, the door suddenly opened, and Lin Zhou walked out. Dark clouds covered his face, his gaze even colder and gloomier. I have carefully managed and painstakingly schemed precisely to defy the heavens and change my fate, but in the end, Father still left me. Lin Zhou's expression was wooden as he gazed towards the southwest horizon, in the direction of the Heaven Domain and Broad Creed Mountain. working hard for so long, still futile at the end of the day. What's the use of my efforts then? I might as well just go with the flow. Flames of fury suddenly surged within Lin Zhou's gaze. Otherwise, I might as well overturn the heavens and overturn the earth. If I don't destroy your Broad Creed Mountain, I am not human. Chapter 3:14. Led by Yuan Zhengfeng, Broad Creed Mountain launched an all-out counterattack, regaining their lost territory. Making use of Huang Guanglia's loss of the great sun heaven-measuring ruler and his own injuries, Broad Creed Mountain was unforgiving as they invaded the fire domain once more. The Sacred Sun Clan martial practitioners felt that this development was rather familiar back in the War of the Eastern Tang. It seemed to have been like this, first winning, then losing. Not only had they lost all that they had won previously, they had even lost all that they had won previously, a familiar process, a familiar posture, all over again. Therefore, even that feeling of vexation to the point of wanting to vomit blood was exactly the same, perhaps even surpassing it. Knowing that their sacred artifact, the great sun heaven-measuring ruler, had actually been lost in this battle, the entire Sacred Sun Clan was rendered speechless for a time. On the world-illuminating peak, sunlight no longer shone brilliantly, instead appearing rather gloomy and gloomy. The Grand Elder Panbuatai and the head of the 7 reigning suns, the world-illuminating Lord, had both perished at the foot of Broad Creed Mountain. Seated in the great hall, the Sunset Lord's expression was incomparably ugly. He had also gone to the heaven domain, having remained in the South Heaven region to suppress it, not following Broad Creed Mountain any further. Otherwise, it would be very hard to imagine that with everyone else other than Huang Guanglia having been wiped out, he had still managed to survive. However, even as the Sunset Lord felt slightly fortunate, he also felt indescribably ashamed and embarrassed. The Sacred Sun Clan's conquest of the Heaven Domain's Plaza Mountain this time could no longer be described as having come in high spirits and returned in low spirits. They had basically smashed their heads and bled, nearly dying at the foot of Broad Creed Mountain. Their high spirits and satisfaction before setting off now seemed to have completely become a joke. The current chief, Huang Su's face was sunken as water as he gazed at the room before him. After returning to the mountain, Huang Guanglia had entered the room to recuperate, recovering from the injuries Yuan Zhengfeng had inflicted on him. After recovering from his injuries, if he met Yuan Zhengfeng and the clear Qi robe outside of Broad Creed Mountain, Huang Guanglia would still have the strength to battle them. If Yuan Zhengfeng rushed over to trample the world-illuminating peak, the situation would be completely reversed. Even injured, Huang Guanglia would not fear him. It was just that even so, the momentum he had felt when he had first emerged from seclusion, wanting to sweep through the entire world, came to an abrupt halt, broken at the middle. Losing the great sun, heaven-measuring ruler, was an unbearable pain. After looking at the room for a while, Huang Su retracted his gaze, swiveling his head, his gaze sweeping past the higher echelons of the Sacred Sun Clan before him. His voice was low and deep. Defend and wait for reinforcements. Step by step, after my father recovers, the fire field will still belong to the Holy Clan. The boundary between the two sides will still be the boundary between the heaven field and the fire field. The bigwigs of the Sacred Sun Clan all nodded. Huang Guanglia's grandson and Huang Su's son, Huang Jia, stood at the back of the crowd without any sense of presence. Huang Jia was calm and collected about this, but his face revealed an expression of deep thought. Huang Su glanced at Huang Jia. At this moment, Huang Jia had completely returned to normal. When Huang Guanglia had just returned to the mountain and received the exact news, Huang Jia's shocked expression was still fresh in his memory. Even his father, Huang Su, rarely saw Huang Jia like this. To be exact, he hadn't seen him like this for a very long time. Even when the Sacred Sun clan had suffered a great loss in the Battle of the Eastern Tang back then, after Huang Jie had learned of it, he had only mildly commented, "Not being secretive in our actions, the other side saw through us and backstabbed us instead." As the others dispersed, Huang Su's gaze fell on Huang Jie. Huang Jie stopped pondering, raising his head and saying, "Yuan Zhengfeng leaving seclusion early is actually not much. While we don't know how exactly he managed to recover from his injuries, this is still within the plan." Huang Su nodded. In their original projections, the worst-case scenario had been for Yuan Zhengfeng to leave seclusion earlier than Huang Guanglie. In that case, the Sacred Sun clan would have to defend the world-illuminating peak to the death. With the great sun heaven-measuring ruler still present, it would not be so easy for Broad Creed Mountain and the other powers to trample on the Sacred Sun clan. In the end, Huang Guanglie had left seclusion a step earlier. Even if Yuan Zhengfeng had managed to catch up and left seclusion earlier than under normal circumstances, it would not have mattered. At the very most, they would not have been able to completely destroy Broad Creed Mountain. However, under the pressure of Huang Guanglie and the great sun heaven-measuring ruler, they would have been able to suppress Yuan Zhengfeng and the clear Qi robe to the point that they were unable to leave the clear Qi Grand Formation. This way, the Sacred Sun clan would have been able to easily devour the heaven domain, strengthening themselves further. As the strong grew stronger, victory would ultimately belong to the Sacred Sun clan. This was the immense tangible advantage brought about by Huang Guanglie having left seclusion successfully, his strength having improved a step further. Using an upright force to suppress others was bullying them for not being able to defeat them in a head-on clash. Huang Jie said, "The greatest surprise was Broad Creed Mountain's clear Qi Grand Formation. That sudden and unexpected change almost made me suspect that Broad Creed Mountain and the 9 underworlds had really joined hands." While in order to have a good reason to attack, they had pinned a huge blame on Broad Creed Mountain, Huang Su and Huang Jie naturally knew what was going on. Of the 6 great sacred grounds, the one that hated the decimating abyss the most would probably be Broad Creed Mountain. Hearing his words, Huang Su's face instantly darkened. The great sun heaven-measuring ruler, Huang Jie said, "The current situation is roughly equivalent to when grandfather had not entered seclusion and Yuan Zhengfeng had not become a martial saint. It is slightly worse than it was then. Our Sacred Sun clan no longer has the advantage over Broad Creed Mountain, both sides returning to an equilibrium of power. And looking at the course of the Battle of Broad Creed Mountain this time, we might still be at a slight disadvantage. However, as compared to the other 4 sacred grounds, the advantage our 2 clans have is even greater." Huang Jie said, "What comes next is a crucial period for our Sacred Sun clan. We need to look at the overall situation." He paused for a moment before saying, "Our previous understanding of Broad Creed Mountain still seems insufficient now." Huang Jie lowered his head, looking at the ground. The Broad Creed young master, Yen Zhaoge, deserves further attention, greater effort, more detailed observation. Before, I always felt that I had already taken him sufficiently seriously, but now I feel that I have still underestimated him a little. In this great tribulation of Broad Creed Mountain this time, the various unexpected changes, I always feel that the shadow of this person is behind us. This person's personality has many flaws, and there are many areas that we can make use of, but he always has shocking methods that are beyond our expectations." Huang Su said, "You were not able to leave behind anything to commemorate your 2nd natal year." Ah. Hearing his words, Huang Jie raised his head, a rare smile appearing on his face. "On the contrary, the first miscalculation in my life leaves an extremely deep impression on me." Swiveling his head to look in the direction of the northern heaven domain, he muttered to himself. At the same time, It is also the first time I have felt such an intense desire to kill someone, and someone of the same age at that, in the central heaven region of the heaven domain on Broad Creed Mountain. Yen Zhaoge looked at the silently circulating clear Qi Grand Formation above his head, his expression calm. After a while, he gazed towards the south, then the northeast. The enemy's desire to kill me has not died, with just the slightest hint of movement. They pounce over like sharks that have seen blood. Yen Zhaoge narrowed his eyes into slits. There has always been the principle of catching a thief for 1,000 days, but never the principle of guarding against a thief for 1,000 days. Sacred Sun Clan, Heavenly Thunder Hall, it can't be that you think that we will just let this go like this, right? Chapter 3:15. Sacred Sun Clan, Heavenly Thunder Hall, we have only just begun. Yen Zhaoge gazed at the clear Qi Grand Formation within the sky. At this time, the shining formation patterns had already begun to disappear into the void again. Yen Zhaoge lowered his head to look at the numerous peaks of Broad Creed Mountain before him. The streams of dark red Qi that had arisen earlier had already vanished. The specially processed 9 underworlds dark soil, combined with the modified Devilish Domain Grand Formation and Broad Creed Mountain's own clear Qi Grand Formation, displayed shocking power. However, following the disappearance of the devilish mark on Yen Zhaoge's hand, wanting to open up a passageway to the 9 underworlds again would not be easy. But even so, Broad Creed Mountain's clear Qi Grand Formation had also improved from its original foundation. The current clear Qi Grand Formation was a peak existence amongst the various grand formations of the entire 8 extremities world. Xi and Dongping and the decimating abyss had caused massive destruction, but the spoils of war that they had obtained from them were also extremely abundant, having many unexpected, wondrous uses that could greatly increase Broad Creed Mountain's strength. Currently, within Yen Zhaoge's palm was a dim blue jade that flickered with a faint blue light. The luster was dim and almost undetectable, but the color was extremely pure. This jade's name was Blue Devil Jade, and it was produced in the Earth domain. However, it was extremely rare, and it was almost impossible to find. In the shadow shrinking pouch that Xi Dongping carried with him, there was a large amount of Blue Devil Jade. Not only were there many of them, their quality was also extremely good. Yen Zhaoge toyed with a piece of Blue Devil Jade, stroking its surface as he pondered in silence. Apart from the Blue Devil Jade, Xi Dongping, Yuan Tian, and the others also had his Heavenly Lake Jade, Ghost Body Congealed Ointment, and many other high-grade treasures, causing one to feel overwhelmed. This time, in counterattacking the fire domain that the Sacred Sun Clan had occupied once more, Broad Creed Mountain would also have many gains. Yen Zhaoge had already asked people to pay special attention to a few treasures, including things like the fire-patterned jade and the underground fire pith, which they had plundered previously and which they had already used up. It was foreseeable that this would be another great harvest. At the same time, news also came from the Wind Domain to the west that Broad Creed Mountain's powerful counterattack had already descended south from the Gan region, attacking the Qin region that the Sacred Sun Clan had occupied. They followed up their victory and did not show any mercy. With Huang Guangliu injured and the Great Sun Heaven Measuring Ruler lost, the Sacred Sun Clan could only grit their teeth and swallow this bitter pill once more. When Huang Guangliu had finally recovered from his injuries and was preparing to counterattack, Broad Creed Mountain released something else. In Xi and Dongping's hands was the complete list of decimating abyss members. There was no lack of people from the other 5 sacred lands. The authenticity of this name list naturally had to be carefully examined. It wasn't that there wasn't the possibility of Xi and Dongping purposefully making false accusations, causing the people of the 8 extremities world to panic. However, its value was also self-evident. Broad Creed Mountain's momentum was established, pressuring the Sacred Sun clan to the point where they couldn't even raise their heads. At the same time, the mountain domain's sacred ground, Infinite Boundless Mountain, was also unceasingly exerting pressure on the Heavenly Thunder Hall. What caused Yen Zhaoga to feel emotional was that while Infinite Boundless Mountain had stood on Broad Creed Mountain's side from the beginning to the end, in the great battle of Broad Creed Mountain had even restrained the Heavenly Thunder Hall. But if Huang Guanglie were to die at the foot of Broad Creed Mountain, Infinite Boundless Mountain's stance would be hard to predict, with even Jade Sea City having other thoughts. The game between the top forces would always change due to the changes in the situation. When Yuan Zhongfeng and the others returned to Broad Creed Mountain, it was already many days later. Through the concerted efforts of all of Broad Creed Mountain, their clan finally regained its former appearance. The only special thing was that the fire leaving Peak's peak had been sharpened. The clan's experts had flattened it once more, just that the height of the peak had been slightly shorter than before. Not long after Yuan Zhongfeng's return, Broad Creed Mountain announced to the world, selectively announcing the entire story of the decimating abyss, as well as the news of the deaths of the Devil Saint Yuan Tian and Xian Dongping. Broad Creed Mountain didn't hide Xian Dongping's true identity, instead announcing to the world that they were cleaning up after themselves. While there had long been rumors, when Broad Creed Mountain itself announced it, it still shook the world. Other than the problem of the decimating abyss, Broad Creed Mountain naturally didn't have the intention of letting the attacks of the Sacred Sun clan and the Heavenly Thunder Hall off lightly. Both sides had their own arguments. Some wrangling was unavoidable. It was just that the momentum of the Sacred Sun clan and the Heavenly Thunder Hall seemed a little weak no matter how one looked at it. And not long after that, Broad Creed Mountain announced to the world once more that the old chief, Yuan Zhongfeng, had officially abdicated his position, no longer holding the position of Broad Creed Mountain's chief, instead becoming a grand elder, devoting himself to cultivation. Broad Creed Mountain's new chief was Yen Di, who had previously assumed the role of chief. Yen Zhaoga's father, Yen Di, officially became Broad Creed Mountain's new chief. Broad Creed Mountain's legacy continued once more. Whether it was the battle with the decimating abyss earlier or the battle with the Sacred Sun clan afterwards, many details were revealed, with the name of Yen Wudi officially resounding once more in the great lands of the Eight Extremities world. After dominating the martial scholar realm, Yen Di once again overlooked all the martial grandmasters of the entire Eight Extremities world. Infinite Boundless Mountain's chief, the northern peak towering sky, Chu Yen, sent people to congratulate him, congratulating Yen Di on becoming Broad Creed Mountain's new chief on one hand, and also congratulating Yuan Zhongfeng on transcending mortality and entering sainthood, stepping into the martial saint realm. In the congratulatory notes sent to Yuan Zhongfeng, Chu Yen changed the way he addressed Yuan Zhongfeng from heaven-equaling hand to heaven-equaling saint. Seeing this, a hint of a smile appeared at the corners of Yen Zhaoga's mouth. Broad Creed Mountain's tradition was that the successive clan leaders were all addressed with heaven starting from their founder, the heaven-establishing old man Qiu Yuan, all the way until now. His Grand Master had been no exception when he had assumed the position of clan leader that year. The title he had prepared at that time had actually been Heaven-Equaling Saint. It was just that Yuan Zhongfeng, considering that he had not transcended mortality and entered sainthood, had changed it to Heaven-Equaling Hand. Now, the title of Heaven-Equaling Saint was finally well-deserved. Not waiting for Broad Creed Mountain to inform them, Infinite Boundless Mountain's Chief Chu, Yen having taken the initiative to change the title, undoubtedly also expressing his sincerity in continuing their alliance. As for what Infinite Boundless Mountain was planning in private, that was another matter altogether. After all, it was not just the Sacred Sun clan now. Even Broad Creed Mountain had risen once more, clearly being stronger than the other four sacred grounds. Yen Zhaoga swiveled his head to look at his father. Yen Di, the chaos of the flame devils on the East Sea has still not been quelled, and Jade Sea City and Turbid Wave Pavilion are still entangled with them. However, after receiving the news, they have also sent people to congratulate us, who will be arriving very soon. After Grand Master, you will also be taking over the position of clan leader. How should I address you? Actually, I still feel that Yen Wudi suits you the best. Yen Di said, I have never cared about such things. Master can just decide. After nodding, Yen Zhaoga said, after this matter, I have to make some preparations. When the time comes, I might need the clan to help me gather some resources. Right outside of the Heaven Domain, I will need to negotiate with the other sacred grounds. Yen Di gazed over, extremely solemn, regarding eldest apprentice brother's daughter-in-law, Inyushin and little June. Yen Zhaoga's expression was serious. I have some ideas. While I do not have sufficient confidence, I will definitely do my best. Chapter 3:16. When Shurtai's grandson, Shur Songtao's son, Shur Jun, had been born that year, Yen Di had been present as well, watching the little fella grow from an infant in swaddling clothes to learning to walk on his own. The little fellow's name was given by Yuan Zhengfeng. All of Broad Creed Mountain paid close attention to the sole descendant left behind by Shur Tai. Yen Di looked at Yen Zhaoga. What do you have in mind? What do you need? Yen Zhaoga answered earnestly, my thoughts are still not mature yet. I intend to make a trip to the extreme northern lands, only coming to a conclusion after I have gone there and investigated the area. However, I can't rush it for the time being. The northernmost land is currently in the freezing period. It's useless even if I go there. I can take advantage of this period of time to carefully make some preparations. At the same time, I can ponder over my own method. There are some things that I need you and the sect to help me gather. It involves negotiations with other holy lands outside of the Heaven Domain. I will give you a list later. While Yen Zhaoga had the authority to make use of the clan's resources, it would be better for Yen Di and the others to appear when it came to foreign matters. Now that Yen Zhaoga's name could also be considered to have spread far and wide, it would be very easy for others to notice him if he were to look for some things with his personal identity. Yen Di nodded. Pass the list to me directly after it has been compiled. Heading to the extreme northern lands this time, I also intend to go to the North Sea to take a look, Yen Zhaoga said. Yen Di thought of something as his gaze flickered. You want to find the legacy left behind by the glacial dragon martial saint. Yen Zhaoga nodded. I've already made some headway on the clues that I've grasped earlier. In the following days, I might be able to gain something from them. If I can obtain even more clues from this, it should be something worth looking forward to. Now, the expressions of Yen Zhaoga and Yen Di both dimmed somewhat. Back then, Shur Tai had obtained the small metal plate from Yi Jing's hands because he had gone to the Northern Sea to search for clues left behind by the glacial dragon martial saint. After Shur Tai returned, he brought back some things regarding the Earth Domain and the 9 underworlds, as well as some clues regarding the glacial dragon martial saint's remains. As Yen Zhaoga analyzed the decimating abyss's devilish domain grand formation, other than clashing with it time and time again, the things that Shur Tai had brought back had also played a considerable role. However, the master of the decimating abyss, Xian Dongping, who had yet to be exposed at that time, naturally also benefited from it. Yen Di said, the glacial dragon martial saint has fallen far too long ago. While the whereabouts of his accompanying sacred artifact are unknown, no one can be certain that it truly exists in this world. If you wish to search for it, I will not object. Still, do not lose your bearings. Yen Zhaoga said, rest easy, father. I understand. Pausing for a moment, Yen Zhaoga said softly, The legacy of the glacial dragon martial saint is indeed something that cannot be confirmed. Therefore, I did not place all my bets on it. To be precise, this is just incidental, or even a cover-up. Yendi raised his brows slightly. Oh, Yen Zhaoga said. Having been attacked by the Sacred Sun Clan and the Heavenly Thunder Hall this time, all face can be considered to have been completely torn apart. Now that the situation has calmed down, it is merely because the two sides have regained their equilibrium in strength. The other party is powerful and will definitely make things difficult for our sect again. Ever since Huang Guanglia's master, the Purple Sun Marshal Saint Zhang Chao, and the final chief of Black Nightmare Mountain had attempted to invade Broad Creed Mountain, while the exalted Heaven Shaker Zhandonga was in secluded cultivation, enmity had already been formed between the two sides. Afterwards, due to Zhandonga's death in the great battle with the Flame Devils, Broad Creed Mountain suffered a great blow to its vitality. As the Sacred Sun Clan gradually grew in power, Broad Creed Mountain's days had not been that easy. Fortunately, the Heaven Diviner Zhan Shilo had led Broad Creed Mountain in concealing their strength and biding their time, passing through that darkest period of time. However, after Zhan Shilo's death, Broad Creed Mountain no longer had a martial saint, their days becoming difficult once more. While the whereabouts of the Sacred Sun Clan's Purple Sun Martial Saint Zhang Chao were also unknown, Huang Guanglia having transcended mortality and entered sainthood with the great sun heaven-measuring ruler in hand, his sharpness was just too great. While Yuan Zhengfeng was strong and Broad Creed Mountain still had the clear Qi robe to hold down its foundation, they could only rely on the clear Qi Grand Formation, having no worries in defending, unable to advance as the Sacred Sun Clan could call on the wind and summon the rain, devouring and infiltrating step by step. At that time, Jade Sea City had been pincered by the Heavenly Thunder Hall and the Flame Devils of the East Sea. With infinite boundless mountain having remained on the sidelines, Broad Creed Mountain had been under immense pressure. Otherwise, Fang Zhuan would not have set his sights on the Earth domain. In the end, Fang Zhuan managed to rein in the horse at the brink of the precipice, allowing Xi and Dongping to continue walking down that path. Huang Guanglia, intent on completely stabilizing the Eight Extremities world, had therefore entered secluded cultivation in search of another breakthrough. Only then had Broad Creed Mountain gained a greater amount of space to move about. However, they had never once relaxed their hearts. If Huang Guanglia successfully emerged from seclusion, their momentum would definitely be even greater, and the Sacred Sun Clan would also become even more powerful. However, the situation was completely different now. Yuan Zhengfeng had transcended mortality and entered sainthood, while Huang Guanglia had also improved. He had lost the great sun heaven-measuring ruler. Currently, with Yuan Zhengfeng and the clear Qi robe watching over Broad Creed Mountain, Huang Guanglia would definitely not dare to trample on them again. If Huang Guanglia was alive, wanting to take down the world-illuminating peak would also be impossible. If the two sides met elsewhere, Yuan Zhengfeng with the clear Qi robe would still hold an advantage. The two sides were allies, Jade Sea City and Infinite Boundless Mountain, 2 against 1, with the Heavenly Thunder Hall sandwiched between them. Now, it was Broad Creed Mountain's turn to oppress the Sacred Sun Clan, settling old scores. It was just that following Yuan Zhengfeng transcending mortality and entering sainthood, Broad Creed Mountain's strength skyrocketing. Faced with this ally who was clearly a level higher than them, while Jade Sea City and Infinite Boundless Mountain had to rely on Yuan Zhengfeng to keep Huang Guanglia in check, it was also unknown what exactly they were thinking. The Sacred Sun Clan's foundation was similarly deep, its strength vigorous. For Broad Creed Mountain to completely crush them and take revenge for their previous attack, it would still not be easy. The situation in the Eight Extremities world had fallen into a dangerous yet fragile equilibrium, Yen Zhaoga said. In order to obtain victory in a competition, there are only two directions we can work towards, either strengthening ourselves or weakening our enemies. If there is a major discovery of the glacial dragon martial saint's legacy being able to bring about a great increase in our clan's strength, that would naturally be good. However, this matter still cannot be confirmed at the end of the day. A cold light flickered within Yen Zhaoga's eyes. It is impolite not to reciprocate. I will send the Sacred Sun clan a gift in return. Yen Di said calmly, dealing with Huang Guanglia is not easy, even if he no longer has the great sun heaven-measuring ruler. Huang Guanglia was unquestionably the current pillar of the Sacred Sun clan. With him injured, the Sacred Sun clan's strength would immediately fall. However, at the same time, even having been badly battered and bloodied at Broad Creed Mountain just now, Huang Guanglia's strength was still indisputable. In terms of personal strength, having successfully advanced a step further in seclusion this time, Huang Guanglia could basically already be considered the current #1 expert of the 8 extremities world. Yuan Zhengfeng, without the clear qi robe, was also inferior in comparison. In the Battle of Broad Creed Mountain, it was also because of Yuan Zhengfeng that Yen Zhaoga's killing formation had been effective, causing Huang Guanglia to lose the great sun heaven-measuring ruler. Yen Di asked, "You want to target their maiden of extremine?" Yen Zhaoga shook his head. Huang Guanglia himself, as well as Meng Wan, are their strongest points. While Meng Wan's cultivation base is low, her advantage in the extreme Yin bout is too great. They will now value her even more, focusing on protecting her, even planning to assassinate our junior apprentice sister Feng. This is currently where their greatest concentration of strength lies. Yen Zhaoga narrowed his eyes slightly into slits. I want to strike where they are weak, where they cannot anticipate. Chapter 3:17. Hearing Yen Zhaoga's words, a pondering look appeared on Yen Di's face. Just now, you said that the legacy of the glacial dragon martial saint was only incidental, or even a cover-up. The meaning behind your words is that your true target is also in the north, or should I say that your methods are to be used in the north? Yen Zhaoga nodded. That's right. He gazed towards the north, then turned to the south as he said softly, "My target is the Sacred Sun clan's southern underground palace." Hearing his words, Yen Di's gaze hardened slightly. The southern underground palace was located in the south of the fire domain, surrounded by a chain of mountain ranges, with many volcanoes within. Beneath it was a massive sea of lava, its boundaries unknown, its depths unknown. That was a place of great danger alongside the wind domain's great western desert, famed since ancient times. However, it was also an important foundation for the Sacred Sun clan to occupy the fire domain. To what extent was it important? There were many uses for the Sacred Sun clan, but just one of them was already sufficient to explain the problem. The Sacred Sun clan's supreme direct lineage martial art, the extreme Yang fist, above the 7 great sun arts, had to be cultivated in it with the help of the southern underground palace. If not for the environment there really being too harsh, the Sacred Sun clan would not have chosen the world illuminating peak. From a certain perspective, that was the true sacred ground of the Sacred Sun clan, while the world illuminating peak was more like a place where they were usually stationed. Yen Di said, "The southern underground palace is a place like the great western desert. While we all know that it is very important to the Sacred Sun clan, it is hard to destroy. Even if we want to completely occupy it, it is also not realistic. If they could destroy the southern underground palace, in the previous battle of the Eastern Tang, when the Sacred Sun clan had been forced to retreat to the world-illuminating peak, Broad Creed Mountain, and Jade Sea City would have already made a move against it." Yen Zhaoga said, "That's right. The creation of the heavens and the earth is incomparably majestic, not something that can be easily shaken by humans. At the very least, the current me is definitely unable to do so. However, it is also not that I want to forcibly destroy that place. Yen Zhaoge gazed towards the north. Once more, it is still hard to say now. I will have to first investigate the extreme northern lands before I can come to a conclusion. Right now, I only have a vague idea. Yen Di asked, "Where did your idea originate from? Although you always have some strange ideas, what inspired you this time to have such a whimsical idea?" Yen Zhaoge laughed. "Father, it is recorded in the ancient texts that before the great calamity, there was once a strange matter which concerned a hegemonic power of the martial Tao of that time, the snowy immortal palace. I wonder if you have heard of it. You are talking about the matter of the heavenly ice spring of the snowy immortal palace drying up?" Yen Di asked, after pondering for a moment. The great calamity had caused many things to go extinct, causing many things to turn into legends, becoming mere bits and pieces of hearsay. Many things had been lost, while some scattered fragments had been passed down, also known to the people of the current Eight Extremities world. However, there were many things that seemed right but were actually wrong. Yen Di looked at Yen Zhaoge. It is rumored that the snowy immortal palace did not seem to have experienced the great calamity, instead having already lost its legacy before the great calamity. Yen Zhaoge said, "I am also not too clear on the specifics. Still, with regards to the matter of the drying up of the heavenly ice springs, I have some thoughts and guesses of my own. Still, I still have to verify them on the spot. It is not the ruins of the snowy immortal palace that has long since ceased to exist. I just want to investigate the extreme northern lands whose environment is similar to that of the snowy immortal palace." What Yen Di knew were rumors, but Yen Zhaoge knew that the snowy immortal palace had indeed been destroyed before the great calamity. However, he was indeed not clear on the specifics. Yen Zhaoge had not investigated the true reason for the drying up of the heavenly ice springs before, and could not be certain of it now. However, he indeed had his guesses. Combining them with his knowledge in other areas, he had analyzed the underlying principles. However, whether this was really the case still had to be tested. Yen Di said, "If you want to head to the extreme northern lands, that is fine. However, you still have to pay attention to your safety. After all, that place is rather close to the Heavenly Thunder Hall. With Master having transcended mortality and entered sainthood, and me also having stepped into the transcending mortality realm, our clan's strength has already increased, already being able to completely break away from our previous conservative stance. The Sacred Sun clan and the Heavenly Thunder Hall will also restrain themselves somewhat. However, if you head to the extreme northern lands and the North Sea, you still have to be careful." Yen Zhaoge nodded. "Yes, I understand." Yen Di paused for a moment before continuing. "You have to keep the matter of Jun, and his mother in mind." Yen Zhaoge's expression was solemn. "You can rest easy. This is eldest apprentice uncle's only bloodline. I will definitely protect it." Yen Di said no more, his hands behind his back, as he came to the side of the window, gazing into the distance. Many scenes that had been sealed within his memories surfaced within Yen Di's mind. "I am surnamed Shi, named Shirtai. I am Master's eldest disciple. Junior apprentice brother, Yen, you are a heaven-defying genius, surpassing me 100 times over. In the future, you will definitely become a legendary figure, like the exalted Han Tian. Eldest apprentice brother, are you really withdrawing from the competition for the position of chief?" "That's right. If it is you who inherits the position of chief, I am willing to follow your lead. If it is second apprentice brother, I want to fight for it. Eldest apprentice brother, my condolences for the matter of Song Tao's family." "I'm fine, don't worry." "Right, junior apprentice brother, Yen, I know that you are also very busy. However, if you have the time, pay more attention to Zhaoga. Yendi's usually sharp, domineering gaze lost its focus at this moment. Yen Zhaoga could more or less understand Yendi's feelings. His heart similarly dimmed as he soundlessly retreated from the room, closing the door behind him. Other than those of Infinite Boundless Mountain, there were also people from Jade Sea City and Turbid Wave Pavilion who had come to congratulate Yuan Zhengfeng on transcending mortality and entering sainthood, congratulating Yen Di on officially taking up the position of chief. From Jade Sea City, those who had come were people that Yen Zhaoga knew while he was only a spirit vessel martial grandmaster. As the son of the first wife of Jade Sea City's city lord Song Wuliang, the Seven Seas' young master Song Chao, having come, was also sufficient to express his sincerity. Coming from afar, senior brother Song, our clan greatly welcomes you. Yen Zhaoga received Song Chao's group. However, our clan has just experienced a great tribulation. While we have passed through it, many of our fellow disciples have perished. Therefore, with my father taking up the position of chief this time, and my grand master stepping into the martial saint realm, our clan does not intend to hold a ceremony. Currently, the entire mountain has many things to do. I hope that senior brother Song will not blame us if we have been negligent. Song Chao said, "This is only natural. In ascending the mountain, we also hope that we can offer incense to the deceased seniors of your clan." Yen Zhaoga nodded. "I thank everyone of Jade Sea City." Besides Song Chao, amongst the group of Jade Sea City disciples, a girl said, "Senior brother Yen, my condolences." It was Li Jingwan, whom he had met at the Heavenly Connection meet earlier. Yen Zhaoga said, "Junior sister, Li is considerate." He walked forward, leading Song Chao, Li Jingwan, and the others up the mountain. After the incense had been offered, Yen Zhaoga said, "A little later, our clan will hold a grand funeral for our fellow disciples who perished this time. If you all wish to stay behind to observe the ceremony, that is also fine." Song Chao seemed to want to say something, yet stopped himself, but his expression was calm as usual as he nodded. "Since that is so, we will be troubling you." While Yen Zhaoga was feeling a little down, he had not lost his calm at the very least. Seeing this, he knew that Song Chao probably had some other mission in coming here this time. It was just that bringing it up now would inevitably be a little rude. Therefore, Song Chao seemed to mean that he would only do so after the funeral. Yen Zhaoga took note of this, his expression not changing. To be continued. Chapter 3:18. What Song Chao and Jade Sea City were planning, Yen Zhaoga could not really tell at the moment. However, for the time being at least, Yen Zhaoga did not intend to continue considering it. For Broad Creed Mountain's entire faction, what they were most concerned about now was the funeral. In this great tribulation of Broad Creed Mountain, having first experienced the chaos of the decimating abyss before encountering the attacks of the Sacred Sun Clan and the Heavenly Thunder Hall, the number of Broad Creed Mountain martial practitioners who had perished was not few. Sure Tai was one of them. Apart from him, there were other fellow disciples who died as well. Right now, their corpses were collected and buried together. Everyone, more or less, had old friends and family. Everyone represented a tragedy and sorrow. And to Broad Creed Mountain as a whole, the greatest influence was still Sure Tai's death. Not counting Xian Dongping and Elder Wang who had been purged, Sure Tai was the strongest expert of Broad Creed Mountain who had perished in this tribulation. Including those who had been corroded by the decimating abyss, Broad Creed Mountain's losses this time were not small, having suffered a great deal of damage to their vitality. Fortunately, Yuan Zhengfeng and Yen Di's successive breakthroughs, as well as the strengthening of Broad Creed Mountain's Guardian Formation, the Clear Chi Grand Formation, had caused Broad Creed Mountain's overall strength to rise instead of falling. counterattacking the territories occupied by the Sacred Sun clan in the Fire Domain and the Wind Domain. They had obtained a great amount of resources, also making up for Broad Creed Mountain's losses. Meanwhile, their enemies, the Sacred Sun clan and the Heavenly Thunder Hall, had similarly suffered heavy losses, especially the Sacred Sun clan, who had lost their sacred artifact, the Great Sun Heaven Measuring Ruler, suffering losses to the point of vomiting blood. The funeral was presided over by Yen Di, who had taken over the position of chief. Yuan Zhengfeng and the other higher echelon experts of Broad Creed Mountain all appeared, sending Shi Tai and the others on their final journey. Runes flickered within Yen Di's pupils as he controlled the clear Qi Grand Formation to slowly circulate. As the Great Formation operated, a beam of clear light shot into the distance, forming an illusory world of light and shadow, as if it was another world. It was a foreign dimension, completely different from the one in which Yen Di and Yen Zhaoge had battled Xian Dongping and Yuan Tian. This space flickered with a watery light like a giant lake. The entire foreign dimension, the entire small world, seemed to be a lake. Yen Zhaoge, Su Fei, Feng Yunsheng, Xikong Qing, Ing Longtu, and the other Broad Creed Mountain disciples all had solemn expressions on their faces. Song Chao and the others who had come to watch the ceremony were also watching the world in the lake. Li Jingwan said softly, "That is the burial ground of Broad Creed Mountain's past disciples, the heavenly born lake." Song Chao nodded. "Not bad. According to Broad Creed Mountain's customs, when disciples of the Broad Creed Mountain perished, other than the families of the deceased who had special requests, such as bringing them back to the clan for burial, all corpses that could be collected for burial would be buried in the natural spirit lake. After burying the others, Yen Di personally carried the transparent ice coffin containing the stone and metal to the world within the lake. Standing in midair above the massive lake, placing the ice coffin before him and looking at Shi Tai's serene face within, Yen Di was silent, not speaking for a long time. There was even a faint smile on Shi Tai's face. It was a mixture of comfort and joy. Yen Di's face was sunken as water as his palms streaked across the cover of the ice coffin. Now, a figure arrived beside Yen Di. Yen Di did not move as he knew who it was. Fang Zhuan's features were as lean as ever, gentle and refined, just that the usual faint smile on his face was now nowhere to be seen, his gaze heavy. He reached out, as if wanting to place his palm on the coffin lid, like Yen Di. However, when his finger was less than an inch away from the ice coffin, Fang Zhuan's hand stopped in midair, not moving, as if not daring to touch it. Yen Di said softly, "Eldest apprentice brother will not blame you. Master, I and the others also do not have such thoughts." Fang Zhuan's expression did not change, but he resembled a statue as he stood in midair, not saying a word, not moving in the slightest. While the chaos of the decimating abyss had been quelled, Xian Dongping, and the others having already been slain, from a certain perspective, Fang Zhuan felt that he was the true source of this great tribulation. It was he who had first pushed open that great forbidden door, while he himself, with supreme willpower, had closed the great door once more, causing the shadow of the 9 underworlds that had first attempted to extend into the 8 extremities world to shrink back. However, Xian Dongping had stepped on his shoulders, following the path that he had once walked, only then having taken that nightmarish step. Between him and Xian Dongping, who exactly was the true founder of the decimating abyss, it was really hard to say. Looking at Shi Tai within the ice coffin before him, looking at the people of Broad Creed Mountain who had already fallen into the natural spirit lake below, even more figures seemed to surface before his eyes. From clear, concealed lake to the incident of Yunwu County in the Sand region to this tribulation of Broad Creed Mountain this time, Fang Zhuan already knew about Shi Songtao's matter and could only remain silent at this moment. Yen Di said, "Don't waste your time on it. What eldest apprentice brother wants to see more is a carefree, broad Creed Mountain. Retracting his hand, Fang Zhuan nodded slowly, turning and leaving. Sucking in a deep breath, Yan Di released his hand on the ice coffin descending downwards. Shirtai's figure gradually grew smaller, and further away, the ice coffin descending into the lake, waves rippling. Gazing at Shirtai's gradually disappearing face within the water, Yan Di's gaze did not shift for even a moment. At the top of the heaven-rising peak, Yuan Zhengfeng had a sorrowful expression on his face as he looked at the figures of Yan Di and Fang Zhuan, as well as that transparent ice coffin. The person within the ice coffin was his eldest disciple, the first disciple he had ever had in his life. How many years of trials and tribulations had passed together. Many things still seemed like they had happened yesterday. Lion, your master is clear about his injuries. If I enter secluded cultivation, it is very hard to say whether I will be able to come out alive. I intend to choose you as the new chief. Are you willing to bear this burden? Master, junior apprentice brother Fang and junior apprentice brother Yan are both more outstanding than this disciple. The former is too extreme, while the latter is too flamboyant. While as they grow older, they have gradually become more stable. If they want to take charge of Broad Creed Mountain, they still need to be tempered. Sadly, external enemies, like the Sacred Sun clan, might not give us that much time. This disciple's personality is too pedantic, and I'm afraid that he is also not chief material. This disciple believes that whether it is junior apprentice brother Fang or junior apprentice brother Yan, they will both become the central pillars of our clan. This disciple is foolish, but is also willing to lay down my life for the clan. Whatever the position, when and where, as long as the clan needs this disciple will definitely stand up without hesitation. That's also true. Your personality is too straightforward, and I'm afraid that you will be schemed against by those crafty old foxes like unreasonable old Huang and bald Shen. Forget it. Since you insist on not being willing, then let's see whether Hidden Dragon or Invincible can distinguish themselves first and take on this heavy responsibility. Thinking back on his past life, Yuan Zhengfeng closed his eyes somewhat painfully, having clashed head-on with Huang Guanglia, the heaven-equaling Saint Yuan Zhengfeng, who had supported Broad Creed Mountain for so many years, whose name shook the entire Eight Extremities world, who had already stepped into the martial saint realm that he had dreamed of for so many years, currently appeared extremely weak. Seeing this, the Grand Elder Zhang Kuan and He Ning behind him both sighed. They had only seen such a senior apprentice brother, Yuan, once before. That was after Yuan Zhengfeng's master, the heaven diviner Zhan Shilo, had perished. Today, however, they met once again. When you were needed, you said that you would definitely stand up, and you indeed did, as you said. Yuan Zhengfeng muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear. But, silly boy, you've stood up. After the waves have calmed down, you should stand back up for your master. To be continued. Chapter 319. Yan Zhaoge had attended the entire ceremony, Su Fei and Ning Longta standing by his side. The two core disciples of Broad Creed Mountain no longer wore the black-bordered blue robes they usually wore, only leaving behind a set of white clothes, a white cloth tied around their foreheads. Han Long was sobbing uncontrollably. Unlike when his parents had passed away, he now understood the meaning of death, and understood that yet another of his family members had left him. Xue Fei's huge body was like a stone statue as he hugged Han Long's shoulder. His face was expressionless, and his eyes were red. He didn't stop Han Long from crying, and only hugged his junior brother tightly, giving Han Long something to lean on. Yan Zhaoge looked at Su Fei. Senior apprentice brother Su. Xue Fei took a deep breath and shook his head. Don't worry, I'm fine. Yan Zhaoge said no more as he quietly watched his father send off his eldest apprentice uncle Shi Tai on his final journey. At the end of the funeral, the passageway connecting the natural spirit lake to the outside world was closed once more under Yendi's control. Yen Zhaoga and the other broad Creed Mountain disciples all had solemn expressions on their faces as they solemnly bowed towards the gradually disappearing natural spirit lake. Song Chao and the others who came to watch the ceremony also half saluted. After the funeral, Song Chao came before Yen Zhaoga and Su Fei, sighing, "My condolences." Yen Zhaoga and Su Fei both nodded. Looking at Song Chao, Yen Zhaoga asked softly, "Does City Lord Song have something to ask Senior Apprentice Brother Song to bring over?" Senior Apprentice Brother Song is understanding of our sect's funeral and has not mentioned it even now. "I am deeply moved by your kindness. Although there are still some things to deal with, the funeral is basically over. If Senior Apprentice Brother Song has anything to say, you can speak freely. If you need to see my father or master ancestor, I can also pass on your wishes. The pain in one's heart would not dissipate so quickly, and the anger directed at one's enemies would continue to accumulate and ferment. But the dead are gone, and the living move forward. Not forgetting the dead doesn't mean that they can't extricate themselves from the negative emotions. Some things had already reached the point where they needed to be dealt with calmly and timely. Strive forward in order not to lose more." Hearing Yen Zhaoga's words, Song Chao no longer hesitated as he candidly nodded in acknowledgement, but then shook his head. "It is a personal matter. I indeed have something that I would like Junior Apprentice Brother Yan's help with, but it is not something important. It is just that mentioning it before the funeral is a little inappropriate." Yen Zhaoga said, "Since that is so, Senior Apprentice Brother Song should speak frankly." Song Chao said, "It's like this. Your esteemed sect cleaned up your sect, exterminating the decimating Abyss Lord Xian Dongping. I wonder if there were any material gains. I mean, special products of the earth that are hard to collect." Yen Zhaoga asked rather curiously, "What does Senior Apprentice Brother Song want?" Song Chao explained, "It's a special spirit stone known as the Unfalling Ghost Rock. It's unique to the Earth domain. It can't be found anywhere else, and it's only been produced in small amounts in the Earth domain." Yen Zhaoga raised his head and pondered. In his memories, there really seemed to be such a thing within Xian Dongping's private property. The Yen Tian Mountain, Yen Chen Ashan, Yen Qing He, Yen Dong Xen, Yen of Tian, with Yen Zhaoga's current level of authority in broad Creed Mountain, dealing with the resources obtained from Xian Dongping was completely not a problem at all. Also, there really were things he wanted in Jade Sea City and the water domain. However, in order to prevent his target from being exposed too early, Yen Zhaoga said, because of the importance of this matter, Xian Dongping's assets are currently being handled by my father. Senior Apprentice Brother Song can accompany me to meet my father and explain the situation. Our two clans have always been on good terms. If there is indeed an unfalling ghost rock, there shouldn't be a problem." Song Chao nodded. "I will have to trouble Senior Yen." He had met Yen Di before, but had not mentioned the matter of the unfalling ghost rock. Now that they met again, he immediately explained the situation. Yen Di received Yen Zhaoga's sound transmission through his aura chi before saying, "There is indeed an unfalling ghost rock, but the quantity is rather limited. I wonder, how much does little friend Song need?" Song Chao answered, "A square meter of it will do." Yen Di nodded. "Then our clan does have enough. I can give it to little friend Song. Having experienced a great tribulation, our clan has many things waiting to be done. We are in urgent need of many resources. Actually, I want to exchange some resources with your clan. I had originally intended to send a message to your father through little friend Song. An exchange between the two clans would not be just one or two things. Instead, there would be many different kinds of things, and the quantity required would also be immense. Song Chao hurriedly said, "This junior will send the news back to Jade Sea City as soon as possible." Yendi said that would be for the best. After sending Song Chao back to his temporary resting place, Yen Zhaoge and Yendi sat facing each other. Yen Zhaoge rubbed his temples as he said, "Just put what I want in the clan's list of goods." "This is natural," Yendi asked. "Do you think that this is something that Song Chao wants personally?" Yen Zhaoge answered, "I feel that it is not Song Chao alone, but that the possibility of it being something that Jade Sea City wants is greater." Yendi said, "Song Chao is not as conspicuous as you. Most people might not pay attention to what he is looking for. It would instead be more secretive than setting up carriages for trade. Everyone under the heavens knows that you are able to make use of most of our clan's resources as you wish. For him to seek your help and contact you personally, it would also seem very normal." Yen Zhaoge stroked his lower chin. "I did not directly agree to him. Instead, bringing him over to look for you. He should also know that his intentions might have been exposed, with us seeing through him." Yendi said, "I naturally can." Yen Zhaoge tapped lightly on the table by the side. "Unfalling Ghost Rock, Unfalling Ghost Rock, what does Jade Sea City want this thing for? If you can't think of what the other party wants in a short period of time, or what he wants to do with it, then you might as well think about what the other party lacks, what they urgently need." Yen Zhaoge's tapping stopped as he swiveled his head to look at his father. The father and son opened their mouths at the same time, a single word emerging from their mouths: "Sacred artifact." While the Sacred Sun clan had lost the great sun heaven measuring ruler, Huang Guanglie's cultivation base had successfully improved. On Broad Creed mountainside, Yuan Zhengfeng had also successfully transcended mortality and entered sainthood, becoming yet another martial saint expert of the Eight Extremities world, at the same time also possessing the sacred artifact, the clear Qi robe. The current Broad Creed Mountain had already replaced the Sacred Sun clan, becoming the only sacred ground of the current Eight Extremities world that had a martial saint as well as a sacred artifact. Whilst also being part of the 6 great sacred grounds, Broad Creed Mountain and the Sacred Sun clan were already clearly a level higher than the other 4 sacred grounds. With Broad Creed Mountain restricting the Sacred Sun clan, Jade Sea City naturally heaved a sigh of relief. Otherwise, if their mortal enemy, the Sacred Sun clan, suppressed the entire world, unifying the Eight Extremities world, Jade Sea City would rather collectively jump into the sea. However, of the Heaven, Mountain, and Water Domain Alliance, which had originally been of the same breadth and branch, one of them suddenly showing signs of turning from an ally to the head of the alliance, this inevitably caused the other 2 forces to have second thoughts. At the very least, they definitely wanted to raise their strength more urgently. Yen Zhaoge raised his head slightly. The trouble with the flame devils on the East Sea has not even been completely resolved, and they have already run over to look for the unfalling Ghost Rock. Jade Sea City is rather anxious about this matter. Chapter 320. To Jade Sea City, their longtime nemesis, the Sacred Sun clan. Rising in strength was undoubtedly terrible news to the extreme. Meanwhile, the increase in the strength of their ally, Broad Creed Mountain, brought them benefits as well as pressure. A similar problem actually existed for the Heavenly Thunder Hall and Infinite Boundless Mountain as well. Even Turbid Wave Pavilion, who had always remained neutral, pursuing the policy of being an isolated island and possessing a relatively transcendent status, faced with the clear rise of Broad Creed Mountain and the Sacred Sun clan, they were also taken aback. If one wanted to maintain a neutral stance and be completely independent, one had to either have no value to be coveted by others or have the strength to make others not dare to easily offend them. Turbid Wave Pavilion would definitely not satisfy the first condition, and if they continued to remain, where they were while the Sacred Sun Clan and broad Creed Mountain continued to advance, sooner or later, the second condition would also become impossible to satisfy. The neutral Turbid Wave Pavilion was already like this, much less Jade Sea City, the Heavenly Thunder Hall, and Infinite Boundless Mountain. If they were unable to keep up with the footsteps of broad Creed Mountain and the Sacred Sun Clan, they could only gradually fall behind, gradually losing the initiative in the overall situation of the Eight Extremities world, only able to helplessly go with the flow. To Infinite Boundless Mountain, their most pressing need was the same as broad Creed Mountains before, where they urgently needed a martial saint expert to appear. In this way, the wielder of the heaven-cleaving axe would be able to stand proudly in the world. And for Jade Sea City and the Heavenly Thunder Hall, it would naturally be best if more martial saints could emerge. Otherwise, they would have to possess their own sacred artifacts. On Broad Creed Mountain, Yen Zhaoge took out the unfalling ghost rock from his shadow-shrinking pouch while pondering, forging a sacred artifact is not a simple matter. Even before the Great Calamity, forging sacred artifacts and spirit artifacts was much easier than it is now. Sacred artifacts are also not so easily obtainable. There were two reasons why saint weapons were hard to come by. The first was the refining method, which was extremely difficult to refine. The second was that the materials were extremely rare. Yen Zhaoge appraised the unfalling ghost rock. This thing is definitely not the main material. It should be a rather crucial supplementary material. Only with the main material can I determine the refining plan. Only after I have a clear plan and idea of my holy weapon can I collect the supplementary materials. From the looks of it, Jade Sea City already has its main material. I wonder what kind of treasure it will be. Yen Zhaoge stroked his lower chin. In the current Eight Extremities world, the main material of a sacred artifact could basically be said to be a unique, unparalleled treasure. Due to the problem of refining methods and plans, the majority of the refined saint weapons would be more suitable for the refiner's martial arts profoundness. But generally speaking, the compatibility of the main materials was also very important. For example, if Jade Sea City used a supreme fire-type or earth-type treasure to forge their own sacred artifact, while it was not that it was impossible, the difficulty of forging it would be extremely great. Yen Di said, "In the process of us working hard to advance, the others have never remained where they are either. Everyone is working hard to improve themselves." I heard that Infinite Boundless Mountain's Chief Chu. Yen also has thoughts of entering secluded cultivation once more, wanting to break through into the martial saint realm. Other than diligently raising their cultivation bases, the martial practitioners of the Heavenly Thunder Hall have definitely always been planning to refine a sacred artifact that belongs to them. Also, it isn't just a day or two or a generation or two. Instead, they have always been diligently preparing for it. Even Turbid Wave Pavilion has probably never relaxed in their search for fortuitous encounters and materials to forge their own sacred artifact. The more resolute they are, the more they are clear on the importance of their own strength. Yen Di said calmly, "Our clan and the Sacred Sun Clan are currently in the lead by a step, but if we stop advancing, there will come a day when our advantage will no longer exist." Yen Zhaoge suddenly laughed. "Then, you say should we give this unfalling ghost rock or not?" Yen Di similarly laughed, pointing at Yen Zhaoge. "Give it, why not?" "That's right, why not?" Yen Zhaoge laughed. "At the end of the day, we are still allies with a common enemy. The Sacred Sun Clan and the Heavenly Thunder Hall are both not easy to deal with. Jade Sea City should also understand this. Even if there are any changes in the future, we should first take care of the Sacred Sun Clan. Everyone running forward together, we are still in the lead. What is there to feel guilty about?" Yen Zhaoge patted the unfalling ghost rock. "Developing together, my broad Creed Mountain's advantage will only grow greater and greater." Yen Di laughed. The affairs of the world are hard to predict, and no one dares to say that they will be able to laugh forever. Still, using methods against enemies is only natural, but using methods against allies, does our clan not even have that bit of confidence? Yen Zhaoga spread his hands apart. Of course, the prerequisite is that this ally of ours doesn't have any crooked thoughts. Yen Di said, as the current youngest martial saint of the Eight Extremities world, Song Wuliang is not so foolish. Moreover, the enmity between them and the Sacred Sun clan is not any inferior to our enmity with the Sacred Sun clan in the slightest. Of the current martial saint experts of the Eight Extremities world, including the newly ascended Yuan Zhongfeng and the recently deceased Devil Saint Yuan Tian, there were a total of 7. Jade Sea City's city lord, the Jade Sea martial saint Song Wuliang, was the youngest. Of course, this young was in comparison to Yuan Zhongfeng, Huang, Guanglie, and the others. Song Wuliang's actual age was also not young, being much older than Shi Tai, Fang Zhuan, and the others. However, strictly in terms of seniority, Song Wuliang was actually of a generation lower than them, being of the same generation as Shi Tai, Yen Di, and the others. On the other hand, Song Wuliang had a son at an old age, the Seven Seas young master Song Chao not being that old. Yen Zhaoga suddenly thought of something as he looked at Yen Di. Right, father, news from the family. The matter he was referring to was the rumor that Yen Di did not truly possess the bloodline of the Central Heaven region's Yen family. While it had been suppressed by Yen Zhaoga with thunderous methods, the truth of the matter was still a little hard to say. The letter left behind by Yen Di's grandfather was the greatest problem. Having been verified by his third granduncle Yen Wenjin, the letter had been genuine, not having been forged, at the very least, with Yen Wenjin's discernment ability, she was unable to tell that it was forged. This way, the matter was actually rather big. In truth, Yen Zhaoga himself actually didn't really care about this, but it was hard to say how Yen Di would feel about it. Yen Di looked calmly at Yen Zhaoga. I regard myself as a member of the Yen family, and there are people in the family who regard me as family. That is enough. Hearing his words, Yen Zhaoga nodded soundlessly. Yen Di said, the 5th extreme Yin bout is about to arrive. This time, we can let junior apprentice Sister Feng participate. She also needs to personally experience the extreme Yin bout that the extreme Yin crown holds, increasing her experience in clashing with the other maidens of extreme Yin. Yen Zhaoga rubbed his temples. However, if there are no major accidents, there shouldn't be much hope this time. My original prediction was that the 6th extreme Yin bout would be junior apprentice Sister Feng's chance to display her strength. However, the Sacred Sun clan also uses the yin-yang coexisting technique to nurture their maidens of extreme Yin, causing their strength to rise a step further. While junior apprentice Sister Feng's effort surpasses that of ordinary people, in order to make up for the time she has lost earlier, some patience is still required. Hearing his words, Yen Di nodded. Since I have already handed this matter over to you, you will be responsible for it. Since we are participating in the 5th extreme Yin bout, you should also accompany us this time. Yen Zhaoga said, that's exactly what I was thinking. Chapter 3:21. Following the great tribulation that Broad Creed Mountain had suffered, there were many things that needed to be done. It was not just the construction of the mountain, but also many personnel adjustments. Disregarding everything else, with Xi and Dongping having been purged and Shi Tai having perished, the 2 important positions of the Martial Repository's first seat and Disciplinary Hall's first seat had been vacated. These need to be filled by people. Yen Zhaoga did not say anything about this. However, his current position was not ordinary, as he had the qualifications to even participate in the clan's internal decision-making meetings. Broad Creed Mountain's final decision was to summon back the 2 higher echelon experts who had been dispatched to the East Sea and the Earth domain. In order to deal with the threat of the flame devil world on the East Sea, the 6 great sacred grounds had long since come to an agreement that each of them would send out a mid-essence talisman martial grandmaster expert who was at least at the 8th level of the martial grandmaster realm to be stationed on the East Sea, guarding over the critical juncture between the flame devil world and the 8 extremities world. The various families could change the people they wanted, but each family had to maintain at least one peak martial grandmaster stationed at sea. Together, they formed the first line of defense to monitor the flame demon great world's movements and deal with the daily small-scale conflicts. If the flame devils made any major movements, the coastal Heavenly Thunder Hall, Jade Sea City, and Turbid Wave Pavilion would immediately send reinforcements to deal with it. Depending on the situation, the inland Infinite Boundless Mountain, Broad Creed Mountain, and the Sacred Sun Clan would also have to dispatch experts to reinforce the East Sea when necessary. However, that would generally be a very serious matter, similar to the all-out war with the Flame Devils that year. It had already been a few years since such a situation had occurred in the end. Generally speaking, major matters would be like the incident at Clear Concealed Lake earlier and the Great Tribulation of Broad Creed Mountain this time, with Jade Sea City and the other powers dealing with it. Their daily dealings with the Flame Devils and the purging of the Flame Devils who had invaded the 8 extremities world were all handled by those 6 martial grandmasters of each of the 6 great sacred grounds. Under their command, there were also martial artists from the same sect who were either permanently stationed or temporarily training. Feng Yunxing's former master of the Sacred Sun Clan, had perished in a battle with the Flame Devils when he had been stationed at the East Sea. Broad Creed Mountain's bigwigs stationed in the East Sea were usually referred to as the East Sea's First Seat Elder. Speaking of which, this was a tough job. It was similar to guarding the borders, but there were not many benefits to speak of. At the same time, one had to fight against the Flame Devils all year round. Therefore, ever since Broad Creed Mountain's East Sea First Seat Master had been established, it had always been a rotation system. What was worth mentioning was that before Yen Zhaoga's father, Yen Di, had inherited the position of First Seat Elder of the Martial Inheritance Hall, he had been the East Sea's First Seat Elder, slaying the Flame Devils on the Great Sea to the point that the entire sky was filled with flowing flames, incinerating the heavens and boiling the sea, his fame spreading far and wide. Meanwhile, the current First Seat Elder of Broad Creed Mountain was another peak expert of the late Essence Talisman stage at the 9th level of the Martial Grandmaster realm, Chang Zheng. During Broad Creed Mountain's Great Tribulation, Chang Zheng had wanted to return to the clan. In the end, the Flame Devils had invaded, causing chaos everywhere. The longtime elder of the Sacred Sun Clan, who was permanently stationed at the East Sea, just happened to clash with him. The two clashed with the Flame Devil experts, whilst also facing off against each other, Chang Zheng thus being delayed in the East Sea. Now that the Great Tribulation of Broad Creed Mountain had come to an end, and the chaos of the Flame Devils in the East Sea had gradually subsided, Broad Creed Mountain had dispatched someone to replace Chang Zheng, transferring him back. Yen Zhaoga was rather familiar with the new East Sea First Seat Elder. It was precisely Feng Yunsheng and Xikong Qing's master, Fu Enshu. The situation in the Earth region was similar to the East Sea. While the decimating abyss had been exterminated, the Earth domain still existed. There would still be people guarding it, but Broad Creed Mountain would also have to make some adjustments in their personnel. Song Chao conveyed Broad Creed Mountain's intentions to Jade Sea City. Jade Sea City very quickly responded, expressing that they were happy to see the large amount of resources exchanged between the two sides. They would do their best to satisfy Broad Creed Mountain's needs. The two sides were allies in the first place, often interacting with each other. However, the scale this time was exceptionally huge. Both sides had to make corresponding preparations. Song Chao also felt that Yen Zhaoge and Broad Creed Mountain might have realized their intentions. However, Broad Creed Mountain did not make things difficult for Jade Sea City. In the exchange of resources, they also did not intentionally raise the price. While the price was comparatively higher than before, to Jade Sea City, the gains from obtaining the unfalling ghost rock were much greater than what they had paid. Song Chao was a kind and magnanimous person. Seeing Yen Zhaoge again, he was exceptionally grateful. Senior brother Song is really too polite. Yen Zhaoge held a jade talisman in his hand, looking at Song Chao. Our two clans have always been on good terms, helping each other out. Song Chao said, "No need to decline, junior brother Yen. This precious jade talisman may be a fortuitous encounter, but it is still an ephemeral object. Song Chao actually feels guilty in using this as a gift. It's just that I really don't have anything valuable on me, and other things are really not enough." Yen Zhaoge stroked the jade talisman. Both sides were well aware of why Song Chao had added such a gift. Therefore, he smiled. With senior brother Song's great hospitality, it would be too pretentious of me to decline. Since that is so, I thank senior brother Song. Song Chao shook his head. It's junior brother, Yen, who is too polite. Yen Zhaoge pondered for a moment before asking, "Senior brother Song is about to return to the water domain." Song Chao said, "I'll be leaving within these 2 days." Yen Zhaoge stood up. "I'll see you off." The two left together, Yen Zhaoge sending Ahu some instructions via sound transmission with his Orochi. Ahu nodded and left. Yen Zhaoge and Song Chao returned to their lodgings. As soon as they entered the courtyard, they saw two figures shuttling about unceasingly, sparring with one another. The two figures were Sikong Qing and Li Jingwan. The sparring between the two was rather amicable. On one hand, it was behind closed doors, unknown to the outside world, and on the other, it was only a simple sparring session. They didn't go to Fire-Leaving Peak, where disciples of Broad Creed Mountain sparred, or to the Martial Inheritance Hall. They just sparred behind closed doors at the lodgings of Song Chao's group. The cultivation bases of the two girls were not low now. If they fought freely, their destructive power would already be very shocking. Emptying the surrounding buildings would be nothing difficult for them. Therefore, their current sparring method was mostly based on variations in their techniques and their understanding of martial arts, not using their Orochi to a large extent. It was somewhat similar to when Yen Zhaoge had sparred with Lu when in the Big Dipper sword in the martial repository that year. But even so, as the two figures flew about, they still caused one's eyes to be dazzled. Looking at Sikong Qing's figure, Song Chao sighed. "I already had a feeling during the last Heavenly Connection meet, but I didn't discover it then. This junior apprentice sister Sikong's talent is truly world-shocking." Yen Zhaoge nodded. The cultivation bases of the two present were both in the late Outer Aura martial scholar realm. To Li Jingwan, this was very normal. Her age was close to Yen Zhaoge's. To the core, direct disciples of the 6 great sacred grounds, stepping into the Outer Aura stage at around 20, stepping into the Xiantian stage at around 25, and entering the Heavenly Connection stage at around 30. This was the average speed. But Sikong Qing was a little scary. The current her was not even 20 yet. Yen Zhaoge said, "Junior apprentice sister Sikong's talent is indeed outstanding, worthy of praise." The tone in which he said this was somewhat like a senior evaluating a junior, but Song Chao didn't feel that there was any problem with it. The person beside him was similar in age to Li Jingwan, but was already a martial grandmaster. To be continued. Chapter 322. When in the body refinement realm, Sikong Qing had also been a rare genius, a direct disciple. However, while she had been a genius then, she had still not been as shocking as she was now. After refining qi into aura qi and stepping into the martial scholar realm, her rate of improvement had become extremely terrifying. In Yan Zhaoga's impression, she was completely not inferior to the likes of Yi Jing and Zhao Hao. Yan Zhaoga was rather used to Si Kongqing's current outstanding talent, not finding it strange. Just having felt this, Song Chao and the others were already hard-pressed to remain calm. To Song Chao and the others, however calm they were, they too felt pressured at this moment. Yan Zhaoga was already not something that could be described with just shocking talent. And other than Yan Zhaoga, the other members of Broad Creed Mountain's younger generation had also displayed a level that surpassed that of their peers. Broad Creed Mountain's geniuses seemed about to welcome a surge. Although for potential to be converted into true strength, for young geniuses to grow into true bigwigs, time was needed to accumulate and be verified. However, Song Chao suddenly thought of the generation of the exalted heaven shaker Zhan Dongge and the heaven diviner Zhan Shilo. Especially now, the battle between Si Kongqing and Li Jingwan was also gradually beginning to determine a victor. The two did not go overboard, fighting without any anger at all. However, Si Kongqing's advantage was growing greater and greater. It was just that Li Jingwan was extremely resilient, executing Jade Sea City's direct lineage defensive martial art, unmoving reef, stably guarding her own position, resembling a reef on the seashore that remained unmoving despite the crashing of the tempestuous waves. It was not so easy for Si Kongqing to completely turn her advantage into victory. In the heavenly connection meet at Clear Concealed Lake, Li Jingwan had not fought much, and Yan Zhaoga also did not understand her very well. Afterwards, when Li Jingwan had been captured by Lu Shengfeng and the others, she had only managed to escape thanks to Yan Zhaoga's rescue. However, that was because Lu Shengfeng and the others were all late Xiantian martial scholar experts. The difference in their cultivation base is too great. With even Wan Ping and Yi Zhongzhou having fallen, Li Jingwan had also been hard-pressed to resist. Currently, clashing with Si Kongqing, who was also an outer aura martial scholar, Yan Zhaoga had already seen through some of her abilities. This girl's martial talent was similarly not low. While she was inferior to Si Kongqing, she was also rather outstanding, not letting down her reputation as a direct disciple of Jade Sea City's sacred ground fall. Amidst the defensive stance of the immovable reef, tightly guarding the door, another supreme martial art of Jade Sea City, the dark sea flow, was also mixed within. Dark sea streamers were like the undercurrents at the bottom of the sea. They contained extremely strong hidden force and hidden force. They could attack and defend at the same time, neutralize the enemy's attacks, and invisibly injure the enemy. A martial art like the Dark Sea Flow was the reason why Jade Sea City had been privately described by some first- and second-rate powers as Jade Sea City is the most vicious. Apart from the unmovable reef and the Dark Sea Current, Li Jingwan was not only defending and not attacking. While guarding her own door tightly, she would suddenly launch a line edge, like a needle hidden in silk floss, causing Si Kongqing to have to be careful, not daring to go all out and attack. However, on the whole, it was still Si Kongqing who held the upper hand. And from Yan Zhaoga's understanding of Si Kongqing's style, she belonged to the grand and majestic type of martial Dao, being rather similar to Shi Tai and Su Fei. Even if he fell into a disadvantageous position, he would not lose his composure and advance step by step. It was not impossible for him to make a comeback. Having the upper hand, while it was rare for him to obtain a quick victory, his advantage would grow greater and greater, becoming more and more stable, not giving his opponent any hope of making a comeback. Indeed, after fighting for a while longer, while she had still not truly been defeated, Li Jingwan sighed lightly. "Junior apprentice Sister Sikong, good skills. I admit that I am inferior." Saying thus, she retreated, leaping out of the battle's circle. Si Kongqing did not pursue her, keeping her sword and standing, cupping her hands towards Li Jingwan. "Senior apprentice sister Li, thanks for going easy." Yan Zhaoge smiled. "I heard that you have already officially reported to the clan that you are going out on a long journey tempering your martial Dao." Sikong Qing nodded. "Yes, Master has already agreed." Yan Zhaoge asked, "Have you decided on the route? Where is your first stop?" Sikong Qing answered, "The East Sea." The East Sea had never been a place of calm and tranquil winds. There were many strange beasts, at the same time also many solitary martial practitioners who took risks out of desperation, drifting along with the waves. These were all vicious characters, used to living a life of licking blood, on the edge of a knife, lawless, and out of control. A considerable portion of them did not even give face to the 6 great sacred grounds, hiding in the depths of the sea after causing trouble. If they could avoid it, they would avoid it, but if they couldn't, they would resign themselves to their fate. The situation in the sea was complicated. Wanting to find someone was no different from finding a needle in a haystack. It was only the experts of Jade Sea City, who were similarly familiar with the situation in the sea, that could cause these people to feel some fear. Especially with the entrance to the Flame Devil world being on the East Sea, with flame devils frequently entering, that place was filled with danger. In going to the East Sea, Sikong Qing naturally did not intend to be by Fu Enshu's side at all times. Therefore, it would be very hard to guarantee her safety. However, it was also precisely because of this that Sikong Qing intended to head to the East Sea. Yan Zhaoge swiveled his head to look at Song Chao, and Li Jingwan, "Junior apprentice sister Sikong, why don't you travel together with senior apprentice brother Song and junior apprentice sister Li? It is not seeking Jade Sea City's protection, but at least you can understand the situation in the water domain and the East Sea from senior apprentice brother Song, and the others not going there in the dark. On the sea, many times natural disasters are more ominous than man-made disasters. In the water domain of the 8 extremities world, more than half of it was the sea, the land to the east of the mainland, as well as the part of the sea near the mainland, formed the water domain. Jade Sea City was situated on a massive island on the East Sea. Numerous islands dotted the sea densely like stars in the sky, all of them also belonging to the water domain. The sea was usually divided into the North Sea, the East Sea, and the South Sea. The part near the mainland was known as the Inner North Sea, the Inner East Sea, and the Inner South Sea. The Inner East Sea was completely a part of the water domain, while the Inner North Sea and the Inner South Sea, other than being encompassed by the water domain, each had a portion that belonged to the thunder domain and the lake domain respectively. Outside the water domain were the 3 great outer seas. Further east of the 3 great outer seas was generally known as the deep ocean. Hearing his words, Sikong Qing nodded. "Yes, I understand. I might have to trouble senior apprentice brother Song and senior apprentice sister Li afterwards." Song Chao and Li Jingwan both said that it was fine. Li Jingwan smiled slightly, holding Sikong Qing's hand. "Jingwan is untalented, but I can still be a guide for junior apprentice sister Sikong." Broad Creed Mountain and Jade Sea City had originally been on friendly terms. In the incident of the devilish domain at Clear Concealed Lake, she had also been saved by Yan Zhaoge. Therefore, she had a very good impression of Broad Creed Mountain. While Sikong Qing's personality was cold, her heart was devoted to the martial Dao, her mind pure and clear. Li Jingwan also felt that she was rather amiable. On the other hand, while Sikong Qing didn't like to interact with others, she could also feel Li Jingwan's good intentions without any distracting thoughts. Being held by Li Jingwan at this moment, she didn't reject it. Yan Zhaoge smiled. "Since that is so, I will have to trouble senior apprentice brother Song and junior apprentice sister Li." Sikong Qing prepared her luggage, then set off with the people of Jade Sea City, heading to the water domain. After sending Song Chao, Sikong Qing, and the others off, Yen Zhaoge focused on his own matters within Broad Creed Mountain. As time passed, many of Yen Zhaoge's ideas were also gradually being perfected. As time flowed, when Yen Zhaoge regained his wits, the annual Extreme Yin Bout finally arrived once more. To be continued. Chapter 3:23. The Extreme Yin Bout was held once a year, and now the fifth one was about to arrive. Over the past 4 years, Broad Creed Mountain, who had always been watching from the sidelines, was finally no longer a bystander this time, instead dispatching their maiden of Extreme Yin to participate in this Extreme Yin Bout. For a time, Broad Creed Mountain once more drew the attention of various places. In the great battle that had concluded in the Central Heaven region of the Heaven Domain not long ago, Broad Creed Mountain had swept through the decimating abyss, also dominating the allied forces of the Sacred Sun Clan and the Heavenly Thunder Hall, defeating Huang Guanglia, who had emerged from seclusion with the momentum of the heavens, even causing the Sacred Sun Clan to lose the Great Sun Heaven-measuring ruler, causing the internal situation of the entire Eight Extremities world to change greatly. The Sacred Sun Clan's position as the #1 sacred ground had been completely shaken. The Broad Creed Mountain that had reigned over the Eight Extremities world in the past had officially risen once more. Under such a background, Broad Creed Mountain having even begun to participate in the Extreme Yin Bout, which they had always been spectating from the sidelines, truly seemed a little domineering. Although, because of Lin Zhou, the other sacred grounds, especially the Sacred Sun Clan, had already known of Feng Yunxing's general situation before this. For a time, the various major powers, the Sacred Sun Clan included, were all paying close attention to this fifth Extreme Yin Bout. A lot of pressure. The Sacred Sun Clan and the Heavenly Thunder Hall, Broad Creed Mountain and Infinite Boundless Mountain and Jade Sea City, the two alliances had already completely fallen out. The location of the Extreme Yin Bout was once again set on the grounds of Turbid Wave Pavilion. Hearing Yen Zhaoge's question, Feng Yunxing answered, "Whether there is pressure or not, I still have to go all out." Looking over, Yen Zhaoge saw that Feng Yunxing's expression was calm and resolute. In other matters, Feng Yunxing was very eloquent with her words, often teasing Yen Zhaoge. While she was magnanimous and straightforward, sometimes others would even overlook her gender. It was only when the matter of the Extreme Yin Bout was mentioned that Feng Yunxing would become serious. This woman, who had always disregarded life and death, was actually extremely competitive in her bones. Yen Zhaoge said, "There is no need to care about the views of the outside world. As for the voices within the clan, there is also no need to care about them." Feng Yunxing smiled. "Actually, it's not entirely unreasonable." Yen Zhaoge blinked. Broad Creed Mountain actually did not have a unified view of Feng Yunxing, especially when Feng Yunxing, as a maiden of Extreme Yin, enjoyed a large amount of the sect's resources. Everyone knew of the importance of a maiden of Extreme Yin. Winning the Extreme Yin Bout and the Extreme Yin crown was no easy feat either. Everyone understood this principle. However, Feng Yunxing, who had originally hailed from the Sacred Sun Clan, inevitably caused some people to have misgivings. It was still fine now, but if Feng Yunxing did not have any achievements in the Extreme Yin Bout for a long time to come, the pressure she would feel from within the sect would far surpass that from outside. All the more so, we should nurture our own maiden of Extreme Yin with all our might. Vaguely, such a tone could be heard. The cause of this matter originated from a piece of news that Chang Zheng, who was previously the first seat elder of the Eastern Sea, had brought back. Just recently, Chang Zheng had found a maiden of Extreme Yin in the East Sea. This girl originally had a master, but her master had died at the hands of the Flame Devils while she had been saved by Broad Creed Mountain martial practitioners. Chang Zheng had originally thought nothing of it, but had unintentionally discovered that this girl actually possessed a rare extreme in physique. As the news spread, all of Broad Creed Mountain was overjoyed. After experiencing the great tribulation of Broad Creed Mountain and Yuan Zhengfeng transcending mortality and entering sainthood, Broad Creed Mountain had obtained yet another maiden of extreme yin, bringing much joy to the clan. Fu Enshu, who had gone to the East Sea to take over the position of the first seat elder, directly took on this female disciple. While in name, this girl was still an ordinary disciple, needing to undergo numerous tests before she could officially rise to become a core, direct disciple and take Fu Enshu as her master. However, the uniqueness of a maiden of extreme yin left no one doubting this. Amidst envy, there were also strange voices that resounded. As some saw it, this new disciple with a comparatively simpler background was more suited to Broad Creed Mountain's needs. Of course, this was looking at the problem from a long-term perspective. Currently, even Feng Yunxing had to work hard to catch up to those in the lead, let alone this one who had just started out. Currently, there were only a few such voices, completely inconsequential at all. However, if consecutive extreme yin bouts proved that Feng Yunxing could not be of much use, with the other party possessing greater talent and potential, it would inevitably cause more people to have second thoughts. This time, during the great tribulation of Broad Creed Mountain, Feng Yunxing had not feared the dangers of entering the devilish domain Grand Formation, proving her sense of belonging to Broad Creed Mountain. At the end of the day, Feng Yunxing still had to prove herself a step further. Disciples of the Sacred Sun clan switching allegiance to Broad Creed Mountain would ultimately be scrutinized with even harsher standards. Looking at Yan Zhaoge, Feng Yunxing smiled. The clan has assigned you a mission, right? After this time's extreme yin bout, you will also have to make a trip to Master's Place at the East Sea, further inspecting that new junior apprentice sister's talent and potential. If she can be nurtured just like how you nurtured me, go and groom her. Yan Zhaoge shrugged. Having double insurance is a good thing, just like how the Sacred Sun clan simultaneously nurtured you and Mengwan that year. However, with you having been delayed for 2 years, it would already be so hard for you to catch up. With her delayed even more, unless her talent surpasses yours and Mengwan's, there is not much hope. Yan Zhaoge said, I will treat everyone equally, but the thoughts of some people in the clan are really too childish. Feng Yunxing smiled. Participating in the extreme yin bout is not purely for exchanging pointers, but for the sake of the final winner, for the sake of obtaining the extreme yin crown. If that junior apprentice sister really is stronger than me, it would also be only right for the clan to allocate resources to her. She raised her brows lightly. However, don't think of me as too weak. With this, Feng Yunxing resembled a saber being unsheathed, regaining her usual sharp, domineering aura. Yan Zhaoge deliberately smiled. In this time's extreme yin bout, as long as you are not at the bottom, I will be perfectly satisfied. Feng Yunxing did not argue, instead smiling, according to what you have always said, in this time's extreme yin bout, isn't it important for us to participate? Yan Zhaoge nodded leisurely. That's right. Therefore, relax your mentality. We will be arriving very soon. Zhaoge, this time, put in more effort, evaluating the maidens of extreme yin of the other clans. The bigwig of the clan who had brought Yan Zhaoge and Feng Yunxing to participate in the extreme yin bout this time was the previous first seat elder of the Earth Domain, Elder Meng, who had returned to the clan after leaving his post. Yan Zhaoge said, Rest easy, Elder Meng, I understand. Led by Elder Meng, the group arrived at the Lake Domain. If Clear Concealed Lake had not experienced that great calamity back then, like the Heavenly Connection meet back then, the fifth extreme yin bout would very likely have been held here. However, now, the location had been changed to where Turbid Wave Pavilion was. Gazing from far away, A country of lakes appeared before the eyes of Yen Zhaoge and the others. The continuous lake was vast as the sea, even larger than the clear, concealed lake of the past. The numerous lakes of Lianhu County in the central heaven region of the heaven domain paled in comparison to this place. Entering the territory of the lake domain, nearing Turbid Wave Pavilion, experts of Turbid Wave Pavilion welcomed them. At the same time, there were also disciples of Turbid Wave Pavilion who came to greet them. It was also someone Yen Zhaoge was familiar with Turbid Wave Pavilion's direct disciple Xie Yuchan. After exchanging greetings, Yen Zhaoge and the others followed Xie Yuchan and the others inside. As Yen Zhaoge walked, he heard Xie Yuchan secretly send him a sound transmission. The Sacred Sun clan has dispatched 2 maidens of extreme Yin this time, simultaneously participating in the extreme Yin bout. Chapter 3:24. Receiving Xie Yuchan's sound transmission, Yen Zhaoge's expression did not change, but his gaze flickered slightly. As time passed, the 6 sacred grounds gradually gained their own maidens of extreme Yin. However, on the basis of nurturing the current maidens of extreme Yin, no one had given up on searching for new ones. Everyone understood the concept of double insurance. Due to the difference in strength between the old and the new, if their talents were similar, then the one who had been nurtured earlier would naturally have an advantage. However, the newcomers were not completely without a chance. For example, 2 veteran maidens of extreme Yin had gone through a fierce battle that was evenly matched, and in the end, both of them were heavily injured, having expended too much of their energy. Even if the winner was decided, it would be difficult for them to fight again in a short period of time, and the newcomers would have a chance. Or they could use the newcomers to wear down the opponent's maiden of extreme Yin without holding back, thereby creating an opportunity for their fellow disciples. However, as a newcomer, he had started too late. It was not easy for him to achieve anything. While the population of the 8 extremities world was massive, maidens of extreme Yin were actually few and far between. Some of them were even more likely to be buried, never to be discovered at all. Or they might have wasted their youth, having passed the golden age for learning martial arts, their qi and blood having already begun to decline by the time they were discovered. Maidens of extreme Yin often differed greatly in terms of talent and potential, being able to cause Xie Yuchan to specially warn him. That meant that this newcomer of the Sacred Sun clan definitely had some outstanding aspects. Speaking of which, the Earth domain aside, even the Heaven domain has been cursed. Yen Zhaoge curled his lips slightly. His clan had also managed to obtain 2 maidens of extreme Yin. Yep, let's just say 2 for now. However, not a single one of them was from the Heaven domain. Yen Zhaoge calculated within his heart. In letting her out this time, is it because the Sacred Sun clan has the confidence that her strength is at least sufficient to be Mengwan's secondary carriage? Just like how Yen Zhaoge and Broad Creed Mountain had suppressed Feng Yunsheng from participating in the 4th extreme Yin bout, the other sacred grounds, for similar or different reasons, might also have made similar arrangements. The most classic example was Turbid Wave Pavilion's maiden of extreme Yin, Fan Xiu. He had suddenly appeared in the 4th extreme Yin bout. Participating in the extreme Yin bout for the first time, he had successfully obtained the crown, winning the extreme Yin crown. Even though part of this was due to the fact that his greatest competitor, the Sacred Sun clan's Mengwan, had been thinking long-term, affecting her performance at the last moment. However, other than Mengwan, the Heavenly Thunder Hall, Infinite Boundless Mountain, and Jade Sea City had all sent their disciples to participate, as well, all of them veteran maidens of extreme Yin who had already experienced 3 terms. The Jade Sea City disciple Chen Sutting was the victor of the 2nd extreme Yin bout, her strength vaguely exceeding that of her peers, as she had always been Mengwan's target and imaginary enemy. But in the end, it was Fan Xiu who stood out from the crowd, fought against Mengwan, and obtained the final victory. Yen Zhaoge had seen the traces of light transmitted back by the seniors of his clan. Fan Xiu was of Turbid Wave Pavilion's direct lineage, having definitely not entered the clan just a year or two ago. Turbid Wave Pavilion had definitely nurtured Fan Xiu much earlier than the first extreming bout, yet they had continuously suppressed her for 3 consecutive bouts, only releasing her after they had become relatively confident in her strength, and the result was shocking. As Yan Zhaoge walked, he thought, starting out early indeed has its advantages. The Sacred Sun clan was the first to discover the secret of the extreme Yin crown, the first to plan it, the first to search for it, the first to groom it. In this aspect, on the whole, they are indeed ahead of everyone else. Counting the earliest Feng Yunsheng, the Sacred Sun clan had already produced 3 maidens of extreme Yin with impressive strength. Turbid Wave Pavilion's headquarters was also on an island at the heart of a lake. On the island, the scenery was beautiful, carrying with it the tranquility and elegance of a water village, not being able to tell that it was a lofty sacred ground of the martial Tao. A small pavilion stood on the island, where the sacred ground of the lake domain, Turbid Wave Pavilion, was located. Yan Zhaoge surveyed his surroundings. This main island was only the most central region of Turbid Wave Pavilion. Surrounding this island, at the heart of the lake, there were also many other small islands, on which there were various structures. Turbid Wave Pavilion disciples, as well as some facilities of the clan, were scattered on these small islands. Everything looked tranquil and exquisite, such that one could not bear to break the atmosphere here. However, if one thought that this place was very weak, that would be a big mistake. The entire surrounding lake was enveloped by Turbid Wave Pavilion's Guardian Grand Formation. While it looked tranquil now, when the Grand Formation circulated completely, borrowing the massive power of the heavens and the earth, it possessed a shocking momentum that could flip the heavens and overturn the earth. Led by Xie Yuchan and the others, Yan Zhaoge's group ascended the main island, arriving before that pavilion together. While it looked small and exquisite from the outside, its interior was like a completely different world, its space seemingly having been expanded somewhat. While many people entered, it did not feel cramped or small. Yan Zhaoge's gaze swept over, seeing that the people of the Sacred Sun clan, the Heavenly Thunder Hall, Infinite Boundless Mountain, and Jade Sea City had already arrived. The Heavenly Thunder Halls, Nianlei, Infinite Boundless Mountains, Ling Hui, Jade Sea City's Chen Sutting, the Sacred Sun clans. Yan Zhaoge recognized them one by one, his gaze pausing slightly at the Sacred Sun clan's side. As compared to over 2 years ago, Meng Wan's appearance had not changed much. Her features were still perfect and flawless, a pair of eyes that resembled that of a small deer, intelligent with some craftiness, yet also delicate and lovable. However, having personally interacted with her before, Yan Zhaoge was clear that this girl was definitely not someone to be trifled with. Strictly speaking, through the tussle of the glacial dragon bone, Soul the last time, the two had not truly met. This was still the first time that they were meeting face to face like this. As Yan Zhaoge and the others entered, everyone's gazes also looked over. Meng Wan's gaze swept past Yan Zhaoge and Feng Yunsheng, finally coming to rest on Feng Yunsheng as she blinked. Feng Yunsheng's expression did not change, but after entering, she also looked towards Meng Wan. Although this was an extreme Yin bout, with the people of Broad Creed Mountain having arrived, most of their attention was placed on Yan Zhaoge. Surrounded by everyone's gazes, Yan Zhaoge was calm and composed as he continued to observe the others. His gaze shifted away from Meng Wan, falling on a young girl beside her. The other party was even a little younger than Xikong Qing. Although her white clothes were embroidered with gold, shining like sunlight, it only caused a chill to arise within one's heart upon seeing it. If one were to say that Xikong Qing was clear and cold, then this young girl was ice cold. Her appearance was decent and beautiful, but standing there, she resembled a towering ice mountain. The Sacred Sun Clan's third maiden of extreme Yun Xiuqing. On the way here, Yan Zhaoge had already learnt of the other party's name from Xie Yuchan. Although he could not ascertain her exact age and cultivation base, she was undoubtedly another young martial scholar. Yan Zhaoge appraised Yun Xiuqing for a moment, before his gaze fell on the host's side. There stood a girl of similar age to Meng Wan. This was Turbid Wave Pavilion's maiden of extreme Fan Xiu. Just looking at her facial features, Fan Xiu's appearance was above average, but her entire person seemed to overflow with spiritual qi. Seeing Yan Zhaoge's gaze look over, she could not help but smile. With this smile, Yan Zhaoge discovered that she had a pair of rabbit teeth that were not too obvious. However, they did not appear ugly, instead causing her to look even more lively and intelligent. Senior apprentice brother Yen, right? At Clear Concealed Lake last time. It was all thanks to you for saving Yao Yao and senior apprentice brother Ruan. The other party's sound transmission resounded by Yan Zhaoge's ears. P.S. Recommending a new urban novel to everyone. Book title: The Strongest Chef Tyrant. Book number 100/349/9298. Added / to prevent blocking. Author: Big Liang Pi, writing about urban dining, relatively rare. It is said that the author himself has many years of experience as a chef. It is worth looking forward to. To be continued. Chapter 325. The Yao Yao that Fan Xiu spoke of was naturally the direct disciple of Turbid Wave Pavilion, whom Yan Zhaoge had met once during the Heavenly Connection meet at Clear Concealed Lake, Zhang Yao. In the incident of Clear Concealed Lake's devilish domain, Zhang Yao had similarly been captured by Lu Shengfeng, and the others like Li Jingwan, having luckily been rescued by Yan Zhaoge. Fan Xiu and Zhang Yao were of similar age, and usually seemed to be rather close. Yan Zhaoge smiled slightly, nodding towards Fan Xiu in return, similarly sending via sound transmission. Junior apprentice Sister Fan is polite. Swiveling his head, he saw that Feng Yunsheng and Meng Wan were still staring at each other. Yan Zhaoge could not help but smile, his gaze falling on Meng Wan once more. Meng Wan finally shifted her gaze away from Feng Yunsheng, meeting Yan Zhaoge calmly, smiling in a refined and courteous manner, not lacking in manners, nor appearing close. Broad Creed Mountain and the Sacred Sun Clan had already completely fallen out. Her reaction towards Yan Zhaoge like this was also really normal. However, no anger or resentment could be seen from her due to the conflict within the icy cold pond back then. Beside Meng Wan, the longtime elder of the Sacred Sun Clan in charge of leading them was the Sunset Lord of the Seven Reigning Suns. The Sunset Lord's emotions were currently calm, not fluctuating in the least, but he was looking deeply at Yan Zhaoge. In front of Yan Zhaoge, Elder Meng also stared at the Sunset Lord, not backing down in the slightest. As their gazes met, it was as though flames were ignited within the air. Within the pavilion, Broad Creed Mountain, Infinite Boundless Mountain, and Jade Sea City's side, and the Sacred Sun Clan, and the Heavenly Thunder Hall's side were clearly separated, vaguely forming a stalemate, neither side giving way to the other. Standing amongst them, the Turbid Wave Pavilion martial practitioners all sighed inwardly as they saw this. Now, a figure suddenly appeared before them, without any prior warning whatsoever, yet also appearing as though it was only natural, as though it had always been there. That was a rather tall, middle-aged woman. Her features were ordinary, yet deep as the ocean, giving off a feeling of being deep and unfathomable. This person's appearance had long since spread throughout the entire Eight Extremities world. There was no one here who did not recognize her. Turbid Wave Pavilion's current pavilion lord, Turbid Wave Rolling Clouds, and Qinglin. At the same time, She was also the only female martial saint of the Eight Extremities world, and the #1 expert of the Eight Extremities world. And Qing Lin, who had the appearance of a middle-aged woman, was actually not young either, as she had managed Turbid Wave Pavilion for so many years. And Qing Lin, who had the appearance of a middle-aged man, was actually not young, having been in charge of Turbid Wave Pavilion for many years. She was of the same generation as Yuan Zhengfeng, Huang Guanglie, Shun Li, and the others. She was slightly younger and had been famous for many years, her name shaking the Eight Extremities world. And Qing Lin nodded slightly, returning the greeting before saying, "The flame devils invading from the East Sea are the common enemies of our Eight Extremities world. The Extreme Yin Bout and the Extreme Yin Crown stand against the flame devils, holding great significance. Maidens of Extreme Yin of the various sects, please display your best abilities, deciding on the strongest one to wield the Extreme Yin Crown. As the host, our pavilion should maintain the orderly conduct of the Extreme Yin Bout. I hope that whoever obtains the Extreme Yin Crown will remember the danger of the flame devils." And Qing Lin's meaning was very clear. Elder Meng, the Sunset Lord, and the others all nodded. That's how it should be. Pavilion Lord, and is right. Yan Zhaoge looked at Qing Lin. Turbid Wave Pavilion's stance was still extremely upright. In the 4th Extreme Yin bout, Fan Xiu had won the Extreme Yin crown back to Turbid Wave Pavilion. In the past year, Turbid Wave Pavilion had always held on to the Extreme Yin crown. In the few major disturbances brought about by the Flame Devils on the East Sea, Turbid Wave Pavilion, and the Extreme Yin crown had always stood on the front lines, truly worthy of praise. Before the 5th Extreme Yin bout this time, the internal situation of the Eight Extremities world had changed greatly once more. Broad Creed Mountain had completely fallen out with the Sacred Sun Clan and the Heavenly Thunder Hall, forming irreconcilable enmity as the two sides were locked in a fierce battle. While their strength was similar for the time being, with neither side able to do anything to the other as they had temporarily fallen into a stalemate, the atmosphere was much more tense than it had been before the Battle of Broad Creed Mountain. Under such circumstances, whichever side obtained the Extreme Yin crown, it would be a nightmare for the other side. On the contrary, if Turbid Wave Pavilion maintained a neutral stance, with Turbid Wave Pavilion holding onto the Extreme Yin crown, it would instead be a situation where both sides could reach a compromise. If one side intended to harm Turbid Wave Pavilion, it would undoubtedly be forcing Turbid Wave Pavilion to join the other side's camp. Also, if Turbid Wave Pavilion did not participate in the internal struggles of the human race, instead focusing on battling the Flame Devils, it would be detrimental to Turbid Wave Pavilion, even possibly incurring the displeasure of the painting saint, Old Man Mo. While this old man did not participate in the internal struggles of the human race, he had always been paying attention to the invasion of the Flame Devils. Of course, if they could fight for it, who would be willing to give up on a supreme treasure like the Extreme Yin crown? Under such circumstances, Turbid Wave Pavilion could still abide by the rules, handing over the Extreme Yin crown and letting the Extreme Yin bout proceed. As usual, their integrity could already be considered rather high, especially as Yan Zhaoge knew. While Turbid Wave Pavilion was conservative and neutral, it was not that they had no desires. Wanting to maintain their independence and neutrality, they would inevitably require the support of great power. All along, Turbid Wave Pavilion had also been working hard to improve themselves, forging a sacred artifact that belonged to them. It was just that they had always stably developed within the lake domain, not expanding outwards, also not interfering in the struggles of the other sacred grounds. On one hand, their integrity is firm. On the other hand, they are also very confident in Fan Xiu. Yan Zhaoge glanced at that rabbit-toothed beauty, looking at Elder Meng, the Sunset Lord, and the others, and Qing Lin continued. Since that is so, this time's extreme Een bout will be held as scheduled 3 days later. All disciples of the various clans, go back to rest and make your preparations. If you have any requests, you can bring them up to our disciples. In previous extreme Een bouts, only 2 people remained after the first round before the final victor was decided. And Qing Lin's gaze swept across the faces of Meng Wan, Feng Yunsheng, Yun Xiuqing, and the others. This year, the number of people has increased to 7. This old woman proposes that after the first round, for people remain, then the victor be decided in groups of 2. What do you all think? Elder Meng and the others said, Pavilion Lord N's words make sense. We have no objections. Yan Zhaoga and Feng Yunsheng exchanged glances, not saying anything. According to convention, the extreme Een bout was split into 2 rounds. In the first round, everyone was enveloped beneath the radiance of the extreme Een crown, each displaying their specialties, communicating with the extreme Een crown and stimulating its radiance. The judge of this round was equivalent to the extreme Een crown itself, because it involved the factor of actual combat. There would be a second round of competition afterwards. In the first round, the others were eliminated, with the most outstanding 2 remaining. It was not just a simple contest of martial arts, but also a clash where the power of extreme Een was drawn upon, deciding the final victor, becoming the owner of the extreme Een crown for the following year. In the previous 3 extreme Een bouts, Broad, Creed Mountain, and Turbid Wave Pavilion had not participated, with the Sacred Sun clan also only having Meng Wan. Therefore, the number of maidens of extreme Een participating in the extreme Een bout had been 4 in total. In the 4th extreme Een bout, Fan Xiu had participated, becoming 5. And this time, with the addition of Broad Creed Mountain's Feng Yunsheng and the Sacred Sun clan's Yun Xiuqing, the total number had become 7. As the competition grew more and more intense, no one was willing to be a side character. P.S. Recommending a new book, Primordial Mystical Door. Author, Infinitely Bad, book number 100/346/4622. Introduction. A group of mysterious sacred cultivators who claim to be of the mystical door, relying on the power of primordial runes, rampaging in all directions in the world of 9 suns. They even dare to battle with the saints of the great wilderness, causing the native cultivators of the world of 9 suns to tremble in fear, not knowing their origins or whereabouts. To be continued. Chapter 326. In order to avoid conflict between the 2 sides, Turbid Wave Pavilion had arranged separate lodgings for Broad Creed Mountain and the Sacred Sun clan on 2 separate islands. Enveloped by a grand formation, if a battle erupted between the 2 sides, Turbid Wave Pavilion would be able to intervene and mediate in time. On the surface of the boundless lake, a small boat floated, extremely far away from the island. Gazing into the surroundings from the boat, one could only see the boundless lake water. A girl sat on the boat, bottles and jars placed before her, holding a metal skewer in her hand. On the skewer was a bird whose belly had been split open, its feathers removed. Beside the girl, there were also a few metal skewers that were similarly skewered with sparrows. The girl spread her fingers, grabbing towards the air before her, a lot of firewood being bound and enveloped by her orochi. She lit a fire on the boat, but the fire was controlled by her orochi, hovering just like that in midair, not affecting the boat at all. The girl placed the thing in her hand on the fire to roast, also sprinkling seasonings on it from time to time in a practiced manner. Now, someone approached. The girl sensed it, but a black saber lay quietly by her side, not showing any intention of retrieving it. Leaping onto the boat, seeing this girl, the other party cheered, "Senior apprentice sister." The newcomer's eyes were bright, her beauty moving. It was precisely the Sacred Sun clan's direct disciple, Meng Wan. And the person on the boat, her long black hair draped behind her, a smile at the corner of her mouth, her gaze flowing, her heroic bearing flourishing. It was Feng Yinsheng, who had already entered Broad Creed Mountain. Seeing Meng Wan, Feng Yinsheng smiled. "Little one came so quickly. My first bird has yet to be roasted." Meng Wan's usual demure demeanor was nowhere to be seen. Leaping onto the boat, she squatted before Feng Yinsheng without a care for her image. Looking eagerly at the bird that Feng Yinsheng was currently roasting, "Senior apprentice sister, I like it a little stronger." Feng Yinsheng said, "I naturally know your taste." Smiling, Meng Wan just looked at Feng Yinsheng like that, feeling as though she had returned to when she had just entered the clan, when she was young. Looking at Meng Wan, Feng Yinsheng sighed emotionally. "While I've seen some traces of light, it has already been more than 4 years since we've met. Little Wan has already grown into a young lady." Meng Wan smiled and said, "Is it because a girl changes 18 times between womanhood and womanhood, becoming more and more beautiful?" Feng Yinsheng laughed in spite of herself. "Of course. I've heard that the young heroes who have the intention of courting you can line up from the world-illuminating peak all the way to the Eastern Sea. In the lake region, we are currently in Turbid Wave Pavilion's core. Direct disciple Wan Ping has always been thinking about you." Meng Wan's expression was indifferent, but she had a smug look on her face, like a proud little peacock. "Of course, I'm cute, beautiful, and talented. Beauty isn't just for show. Naturally, I'll be the dream lover of many." Feng Yinsheng smiled and shook her head. It was only in front of her and Meng Wan's own master that she could see Meng Wan like this. Other than that, the person who appeared in front of the world, including the Sacred Sun clans Huang Guanglia and the new disciples, would forever only be that gentle, elegant, modest, polite, perfect, and flawless. No flaws to be found in her at all, the heavens' favored daughter, who always made people feel at ease and would never make a mistake. Meng Wan's expression didn't seem to mind, but the tips of her brows, the corners of her eyes, every single wrinkle on her face seemed to be soundlessly saying the same thing. "Come and praise me, come and praise me, come and praise me." Feng Yinsheng looked rather interestedly at Meng Wan. In some ways, Meng Wan was somewhat similar to another person, Yan Zhaoge. That person, while appearing to have an orderly demeanor on the surface, was actually also a very smug, very flamboyant person in his bones. He liked to show off his divinity in front of others, shocking onlookers till they were all dumbstruck. Similarly, as Feng Yinsheng knew, Yan Zhaoge's evaluation of Meng Wan was also not low. That year, she had cleverly led Yan Zhaoge to find Feng Yinsheng, helping her out of her predicament and obstructing Xiao Shun's pursuit. Not only had she helped Feng Yinsheng, she had also broken off Yan Zhaoge's tracking of her. At the same time, she had also not directly clashed with Xiao Shun, killing 3 birds with 1 stone. It was also from that time that Yan Zhaoge had clearly realized that this girl who looked harmless, instead even being able to incite the desire of others to protect her, was truly not someone to be trifled with. And having grown up together with Meng Wan since young, Feng Yinsheng understood this all too well. It was only in front of her and her master that Meng Wan revealed her true side. That's right, the dream lover of countless people. Who knows how many men, and there might even be women, want to press you down beneath them. Feng Yunqing's expression was calm as she sprinkled some spices on the skewers, then flipped them over on the fire, pressed them down beneath you, next rolling up and down, rocking back and forth. Meng Wan instantly couldn't bear it. It's better not to. Feng Yunqing smiled as she looked at her. Somewhat unconvinced, Meng Wan snorted, "Anyway, senior apprentice sister, don't look down on me. I can also be considered to have grown up to be a slender and elegant woman now. And regrettably, as soon as you eat, everything is destroyed." Feng Yunqing's tone was slow and leisurely. Meng Wan cried out aggrievedly, "Senior apprentice sister." Feng Yunsheng waved the metal skewer in her hand. It's done. Are you going to eat it or not? Meng Wan immediately scooted over to her, looking even more flattering than Little Meaty and Pan Pan. Of course I'm going to eat it. Feng Yunsheng smiled as she handed the metal skewer to Meng Wan, who instantly ate heartily, happily. This was something that only Feng Yunsheng and Meng Wan knew. Even Meng Wan's master didn't know that her disciple was a super glutton. And just as Feng Yunsheng had said, Meng Wan's table manners indeed caused her usual tranquil and peaceful image of a goddess to appear rather disillusioned. It wasn't that she was uncouth, but she truly had the air of a man who drank wine and ate large chunks of meat. Feng Yunsheng just smiled, looking at Meng Wan before taking out another metal skewer, picking up the bird on it, and beginning to cook it once more. She first ate with Meng Wan, then ate as well, the two chatting and laughing as they talked about some interesting things that had happened after their separation. However, regarding the extreme Yin bout before them, regarding the conflict between Broad Creed Mountain and the Sacred Sun Clan, the two did not utter a single word about it. After they had finished eating, the two girls sat side by side on the small boat, looking at the scenery of the lake in the distance. Leaning on Feng Yunsheng's shoulder, Meng Wan murmured softly, "If I could always possess the extreme Yin crown, if I were a martial grandmaster and had the ability to unleash the power of the extreme Yin crown to an even higher level, even before the old clan chief, my words would also carry weight. I would be able to seek justice for you, senior apprentice sister, and help you return to the mountain. Now, Xiao Shun is dead. Elder Pan is also dead, and the people who persecuted you in the Sacred Sun Clan are all gone. However, all of this is already meaningless." Feng Yunsheng lightly embraced Meng Wan, not speaking. Back then, in the 1 year between the first extreme Yin bout and the second extreme Yin bout, the forces pursuing her had weakened greatly. The reason for this was actually because Meng Wan had won the extreme Yin crown and was helping her out in the Sacred Sun Clan. Perhaps her personality was somewhat similar to Yen Zhaoga's, but they were ultimately different, faced with the tacit approval of the clan's upper echelons, as well as the pressure from the Grand Elder Pan Butai. Meng Wan's personality determined that she wouldn't forcibly resist it. However, she had always tried to lessen the pressure on Feng Yunsheng in a roundabout manner. Leaning on Feng Yunsheng's shoulder, Meng Wan's gaze was a little misty. To her, on one side was Feng Yunsheng, and on the other was her master who had raised and raised her, her debt of gratitude as heavy as a mountain. And to Feng Yunsheng, Broad Creed Mountain had also given her a new lease on life. While it was a joyous reunion after a long time, the extreme Yin bout, the contest for the extreme Yin crown, was something that neither of them could give in to. Although she had already expected such a day to come after learning that Feng Yunsheng had regained her extreme Yin physique, Meng Wan still felt a sense of loss. To be continued. Chapter 3:27. Old friends reunited after a long time. After a short reunion, they separated. After all, they were now of different camps. Moreover, they were two forces that were hostile to each other. When the extreme Yin bout officially began, and they met once more in front of everyone, it was just like when they had first met. You look at me, I look at you. Pretending not to know each other was definitely impossible, but there also seemed to be nothing to say. In front of so many bigwigs, any small actions would most likely be discovered. The two girls didn't even communicate with each other through their eyes. At this moment, in the extreme Yin bout, the relationship between them was that of opponents. It was night time when the extreme Yin bout commenced. Turbid Wave Pavilion was under gloomy and rainy weather today. Dark clouds covering the sky densely, obscuring the radiance of the moon and stars as the night sky was completely dark. Turbid Wave Pavilion's pavilion, Lord and Qing Lin personally presided over the extreme Yin bout. She nodded towards her maiden of extreme Yin, Fan Qiu. Fan Qiu was no longer smiling at this moment. Pursing her lips, her pair of little rabbit teeth had also vanished. She formed a fist seal with one hand, keeping it by her waist, the fingers of her other hand clasped together as she pushed out horizontally. Accompanied by this action of Fan Qiu's, radiance instantly flickered above her head. It was bright, cold, and silent. However, the radiance was bright, instantly causing the night sky to no longer be dark. Moonlight that seemed able to compete with the brightness of the sun appeared above Fan Qiu's head. Amidst the moonlight, an elegant and exquisite pure white crown formed of almost transparent ice crystals appeared. An ancient, desolate aura emanated, clear and distant, moving one's soul. As the faint, clear radiance dispersed, moonlight seemed to illuminate the entire world at this moment. As this exquisite, pure, white crown appeared, its powerful presence was completely not inferior to that of the martial saint and Qinglin beside it. Everyone's attention was drawn at this moment, looking at that extraordinary sacred artifact, the extreme Yin crown. Yan Zhaoge was also looking at the extreme Yin crown. Other than considering the extreme Yin bout before him, he also thought of some other things. Back in the Sand region, after having obtained the pillar of the Divine Palace, he had refined it on a deeper level, having seen many traces of light engraved on it. Amongst them, there had been a mysterious woman who had found the pillar of the Divine Palace earlier than Yan Zhaoge, yet had not taken it away. Now that he had personally seen the extreme Yin crown, feeling the concept contained within from a close distance, Yan Zhaoge could be sufficiently certain that the crown on the head of the woman who had met the pillar of the Divine Palace in the great western desert back, then that he had found familiar, was precisely this sacred artifact that had attracted the attention of the entire world, that everyone had fought over. The pillar of the Divine Palace had been buried in the great western desert for too long, and no one knew when that mysterious woman had come from. However, the other party was likely related to the Divine Palace of the past, which made Yan Zhaoge take note of it. Fan Qiu withdrew her left fist from her waist and slowly punched forward. Accompanied by this action of hers, the power of the extreme Yin crown abruptly surged. Then it floated away from Fan Qiu's head, flying towards midair. The connection between Fan Qiu and the sacred weapon began to weaken and was on the verge of being severed. Although the moonlight still shrouded the world, the powerful feeling of power in the crown was also gradually dissipating. It wasn't that it was declining, but it was as if it had entered a deep slumber. And Qinglin said, "The time has come. The fifth extreme Yin bout is about to begin." Hearing her words, Elder Meng, the Sunset Lord, and the others all nodded towards Feng Yunsheng and Meng Wan, all the maidens of extreme Yin present. Fan Qiu, who had just severed her connection with the extreme Yin crown, all stepped forward in unison, congregating beneath the hovering extreme Yin crown. They all yelled in unison, raising their heads to gaze at the extreme Yin crown. Within their pupils, a luster surged, resembling a faint metallic luster. Affected by this radiance, the extreme Yin crown shook slightly, as if having just fallen into a deep slumber, it had awoken very quickly. Then, the majestic feeling of power appeared once more. It was just that the power fluctuations emanating now originated from the extreme Yin crown itself, not having a clear direction as they were released in response. With the extreme Yin crown as their center, 7 pillars of light, similarly flickering with a faint golden radiance, descended from the sky amidst the clear, cold moonlight, enveloping Feng Yunsheng and the others. Feng Yunsheng sensed her thoughts and feelings, seemingly establishing a connection with the sacred artifact in midair. While it was being shared with others, while the connection was still very shallow and limited, Feng Yunsheng's heart still inevitably shook. That place seemed like her homeland, like an incomparably familiar friend, like the place she belonged to. Feng Yunqing's expression was neither joyful nor sorrowful as she looked quietly at the extreme yin crown in midair. Once, for many years, that white crown in midair had been her unceasing goal and motivation. It was not just the hopes and aspirations of the Sacred Sun clan, but also the life goal that Feng Yunqing herself had been happy to strive for. Sadly, afterwards, it had been shattered like a mirage. Luckily, Feng Yunqing's will was strong as she very quickly found a new life goal, firmly believing that even without the extreme yin physique, she would still be able to live a splendid life. After that, there was hope once again. Gaining and then losing, losing and then regaining. Going round and round, those who had not had similar experiences would be hard-pressed to understand how it felt. For herself, for Broad Creed Mountain, Feng Yunqing had to go all out. While this was her first time officially participating, Feng Yunqing had long since memorized the process of the extreme yin bout. Within the faint golden pillar of light, Feng Yunqing roared, her black saber leaving its sheath and chopping towards the air. Within the other 6 pillars of light, Meng Wan and the others also did the same, each displaying their specialties. The moves that they were currently executing were not purely the supreme martial arts of their respective clans, but the supreme extreme yin arts of their own martial arts combined with the power of extreme yin. Through the supreme extreme yin arts, they had established a deeper connection with the extreme yin crown, resonating with it. After someone had obtained the extreme yin crown, with the extreme yin crown as their Tao and the supreme extreme yin arts as their artifact, they would be able to wield this powerful sacred artifact with their martial scholar cultivation base. The Heavenly Thunder Hall's maiden of extreme yin, Nianlei, struck out consecutively with her palms, resembling rushing thunder. Within the pillar of light that enveloped her, a silhouette appeared, condensing into a great drum. Dong, 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 dong sounds unceasingly, resembling the sound of thunder exploding one after another. Infinite Boundless Mountain's maiden of extreme yin, Ling Hui, resonated with the sacred artifact, with her supreme extreme yin arts manifesting a seemingly unremarkable chisel that seemed able to pierce through a mountain. Jade Sea City's Chin Sutting manifested a massive vessel riding the winds and breaking the waves. Turbid Wave Pavilion's fan show, however, manifested a paper umbrella drifting amidst the rain. This was the first round of the bout to be judged by the sacred artifact, the extreme yin crown. No one would be able to falsify it. Who was stronger and who was weaker was clear at a glance. Infinite Boundless Mountain's Ling Hui was the weakest, the Heavenly Thunder Hall's Nianlei was the stronger, and Jade Sea City's Chin Sutting was a level above Nianlei. The youngest of the 4, Turbid Wave Pavilion's fan show, was the strongest. Now, however, the clear cry of a young phoenix emitted from Meng Wan's mouth. Then, within the faint golden pillar of light that enveloped her, the silhouette of a fiery phoenix took form, spreading its wings and soaring. As the fiery phoenix spread its wings, it instantly suppressed the momentum of the others, dominating them all. To be continued. Chapter 328. Yan Zhaoge looked calmly at the ongoing extreme yin bout before him. In the past few bouts, he had also seen the light recordings brought back by his clan's seniors. Now that he was observing them from a close distance, corroborating them, he had the most direct and accurate judgment of the maidens of extreme yin present. Following beside him, who asked curiously, "Young master, it looks like Meng Wan outshines them all." Yan Zhaoge said casually, "Evaluating the strength of a maiden of extreme yin is not a one-sided thing. Generally speaking, the strength of a maiden of extreme yin's cultivation base, the amount of extreme yin power they possess, and the strength of the supreme extreme yin arts they comprehend all come together to determine the strength of a maiden of extreme yin in wielding the extreme yin crown. In actual combat, It also involves their level of adaptability. Therefore, they can generally be viewed as four decisive factors. Looking at Meng Wan, Yan Zhaoge saw the fiery phoenix spreading its wings above her head, its aura surging to the heavens. What drew people's attention even more was that the silhouette of a fiery phoenix above Meng Wan's head was half black, half white. This meant that the Sacred Sun clan and Meng Wan had already made substantial progress in analyzing the yin-yang coexisting technique to raise their strength a step further, no longer having just seen through it in the fourth extreme yin bout last year, resulting in their foundation becoming unstable and their strength instead regressing. Taking a step back, then was to advance 3 steps forward now. Meng Wan had perfectly illustrated this point. That was why her strength had skyrocketed today, presiding over everyone present. Meng Wan leads in all aspects, fully deserving of the title of the current strongest maiden of extreme yin. Yan Zhaoge sighed emotionally. In terms of cultivation base, Meng Wan herself was a genius in the first place. Also, with the full support of the Sacred Sun clan, as well as having grasped the extreme yin crown over the past 2 years, the increase in her daily cultivation, Meng Wan had already stepped into the early Xiantian martial scholar realm at such a young age, the highest of all the maidens of extreme yin present. In terms of the strength of extreme yin power, Meng Wan was even more unrivaled, her innate talent having been raised a step further by the yin-yang coexisting technique. In terms of the power of supreme extreme yin arts, according to past experience, Meng Wan was also a peak existence. In terms of actual combat experience, while Meng Wan could not be said to have experienced 100 battles, she was still extremely abundant. That year, the extreme yin crown had fallen from her hands a second time precisely because she had wielded the extreme yin crown in a head-on clash with a flame devil king in the East Sea. Although Meng Wan was injured, she was a martial scholar. Being able to survive a battle with a martial sage was undoubtedly a great benefit. Feng Yunsheng had once said that as long as nothing happened to Meng Wan herself, the extreme yin crown would not be lost to her when she participated in the extreme yin bout. These words were spoken from the bottom of his heart and were not spoken casually. Looking at the people participating in the first round of the examination, Yan Zhaoge said neither hurriedly nor slowly, "Infinite boundless mountains Ling, Hui is the weakest, just the opposite of Meng Wan, being rather mediocre in all areas." It might be a little impolite to say this, but if there is no earth-shattering change, junior sister Ling will only be a bystander every year if she participates. The Heavenly Thunder Hall's Nian Lei. Right, other things aside, ever since the fourth extreme yin bout last year, the power of extreme yin has begun to increase. While it is limited, it is indeed increasing. Glancing at the great silhouetted drum in the air above Nian Lei's head, Yan Zhaoge saw that the surface of the drum was also vaguely divided into black and white, one side black and one side white. However, it wasn't clear and was rather blurry. Yan Zhaoge nodded slightly. The Heavenly Thunder Hall is indeed also attempting an yin-yang coexisting technique to raise the strength of their maidens of extreme yin. However, it is all based on their own probing, and having only just begun, there is still a long way for them to go. Things like innovation were often the most difficult at the start. After it had gotten on the right track, it would welcome rapid development, only reaching a certain height and encountering a bottleneck, slowing down once more as they sought a breakthrough. Hearing his words, Ahu also appraised them curiously. Yan Zhaoge's gaze turned to the other side. Jade Sea City's Chen Sudding's greatest advantage lies in her cultivation base. Other than that, the supreme extreme yin arts that Jade Sea City specially created for her are also rather extraordinary. Of all the participants, Chen Sudding was the oldest, having cultivated for the longest time, also having once wielded the extreme yin crown for a year. Currently, She was the only maiden of extreme Yin whose cultivation base was similar to Meng Wan's, also having broken through to the early Xiantian martial scholar realm. The supreme extreme Yin arts were mainly comprehended by the maidens of extreme Yin themselves, but with the help of seniors of the clan, they would be able to use them more easily. Of the 6 great sacred grounds, the martial arts of Jade Sea City and Turbid Wave Pavilion were originally all proficient in the power of Yin. In the first extreme Yin bout earlier, Chen Sutting had been Meng Wan's greatest competitor. At that time, Meng Wan had still been young, and she had finally won by a hair's breadth. In the second extreme Yin bout, Meng Wan had been injured. In the end, Chen Sutting had won, winning the extreme Yin crown back to Jade Sea City. In the War of the Eastern Tang, it had been Chen Sutting who had brought the extreme Yin crown along with Jade Sea City's longtime elders, traversing east to the Earth Domain, cooperating with Broad Creed Mountain and ambushing the Sacred Sun Clan's Great Sun Heaven-measuring ruler. Sadly, however, in the third extreme Yin bout, Meng Wan, having fully recovered from her injuries, had made a grand comeback. In the fourth extreme Yin bout, Meng Wan had strategically chosen to give it up. In the end, Turbid Wave Pavilion's fan show had appeared out of nowhere. However, even so, in the fifth extreme Yin bout, Chen Sutting had still been rather competitive. As for Turbid Wave Pavilion's fan show, as Yen Zhaoge saw it, she was rather extraordinary, resembling a slightly smaller version of Meng Wan, outstanding in all aspects. What was especially worth mentioning was that Fan Xiu's innate talent was extremely powerful. This rabbit-toothed girl might even be the maiden of extreme Yin, with the greatest innate talent. If Meng Wan had not been strengthened by the yin-yang coexisting technique, she might not even have been able to defeat Fan Xiu in terms of innate talent. Also, Fan Xiu of Turbid Wave Pavilion had comprehended and created supreme, extreme Yin arts, which were extremely intricate. Looking at that small umbrella above Fan Xiu's head, Yen Zhaoge nodded to himself. Other than these old opponents, Yen Zhaoge's gaze fell on another person, also participating in this year's extreme Yin bout for the first time. Sacred Sun Clan, Yun Xiuqing. While they hailed from the same clan, Yun Xiuqing and Meng Wan were vastly different. Currently, above her head was the image of a mountain peak. It was a snowy mountain, but on its peak, flames and lava spurted out from time to time. Yen Zhaoge stroked his lower chin. Meng Wan switched to cultivating in the yin-yang coexisting technique halfway through. This girl is clearly no exception, her extreme Yin power being rather impressive. Her comprehension ability is excellent, and her supreme extreme Yin arts are also extraordinary. It's just that she is a little inexperienced, her cultivation base somewhat low, but her overall strength is also extremely strong. Ahu blinked. Being able to receive such an evaluation from Yen Zhaoge, it could already be considered very rare. Looking carefully, Ahu indeed saw through some things. Then, looking at the others, he saw that the leading elders of Infinite Boundless Mountain and the Heavenly Thunder Hall all had rather ugly expressions on their faces. This newcomer, Yun Xiuqing, was shockingly even stronger than Ling Hui and Nian Lei, who had already participated in 4 extreme Yin bouts. The expressions of those of Jade Sea City and Turbid Wave Pavilion were similarly solemn, because Yun Xiuqing clearly already possessed the strength to threaten Chen Sutting and Fan Xiu. The Sacred Sun Clan's leading Sunset Lord was expressionless. Some of the accompanying Sacred Sun Clan martial practitioners behind him had cold smiles appear on their faces as their gazes swept past Yen Zhaoge and Elder Meng, finally landing on Feng Yinsheng. 4 spots. Chen Sutting and Fan Xiu are fine, but you traitor, scram back to Broad Creed Mountain as soon as possible. Chapter 329. In the 5th Extreme Yin bout, the number of maidens of Extreme Yin participating had increased to 7. In the first round of assessment, 3 people would be eliminated and 4 would remain. The standard of judgment was left to the extreme In crown itself. The seven were all enveloped by the radiance of the extreme In crown, at the same time resonating with it. The competition between maidens of extreme yin strength was related to each person's cultivation level. However, it was not a simple competition of martial arts. Being able to better communicate with the extreme yin crown and wield the power of the extreme yin crown was the ultimate measure. All other factors were just factors influencing this final goal. Resonating with the extreme yin crown would directly display this. The extreme yin crown would fairly respond to everyone's communications. The thickness and brightness of the seven light pillars began to change gradually. The weaker a person was, the thinner the light beam would be, and the dimmer the radiance would be. On the contrary, the light beam would be thicker, and the radiance would be brighter. Therefore, of everyone present, Infinite Boundless Mountain's Ling Hui was the weakest, directly at the bottom, while the Heavenly Thunder Hall's Nian Lei was stronger than Ling Hui. She could only be ranked second from the bottom. Although due to Lin Zhou, the Heavenly Thunder Hall had guided Nian Lei onto a correct path, and they could already gradually see results. There were still many areas where they had to work hard on, requiring even more time. Meng Wan was undoubtedly the strongest, while Fan Xiu was basically sitting firmly in the second place for the time being. What was more interesting was that although Chun Sutting seemed to be in third place, her position was not stable. The pillar of light that enveloped Yun Xiuqing grew brighter and brighter with an extremely rapid momentum. Seeing this, everyone's expressions were rather solemn. While they had expected that since the Sacred Sun clan had sent Yun Xiuqing to participate, this girl would definitely be extraordinary, they had not expected this to be the case. She had thought that she was only qualified to be Meng Wan's assistant, but now it seemed that everyone had underestimated her. With 3 people eliminated in the first round, the Sacred Sun clan would actually be able to occupy 2 of the remaining 4 spots. Thinking up to here, everyone couldn't help but begin to pay attention to the other person, who was also participating in the extreme Yin bout for the first time. Everyone looked over and saw that the pillar of light enveloping Feng Yunsheng was flickering. With a saber in hand, Feng Yunsheng tied her long hair into a ponytail. The edge of the blade pointed into the void, where there was a figure of light floating and sinking, faintly discernible, flickering along with the pillar of light. Everyone frowned. The pillar of light that enveloped Feng Yunsheng, when dim, was only at the level of Infinite Boundless Mountain's Ling Hui. When it was bright and dazzling, it chased after Meng Wan and Fan Xiu, one bright and one dark, alternating like a candle flame in the night wind. This kind of performance made everyone somewhat unable to guess. Saying that Feng Yunsheng was weak didn't seem right either, let alone the other maidens of extreme Yin. Even the spectators would have a rather deep understanding of the extreme Yin bout. They could tell that this woman, who had once fallen from the clouds to the bottom of the valley, had truly recovered her extreme Yin physique. However, saying that she had the strength, Broad Creed Mountain's Elder Meng's heart was also a little drumming. It feels too unstable. Is it because the recovery of her extreme Yin physique is still not complete? Elder Meng swiveled his head to glance at Yen Zhaoga. If she has not completely recovered, without a certain degree of confidence, Fu Wenshu and Zhaoga should not be at ease letting her participate in the extreme Yin bout. Perhaps Zhaoga and the others have also made an error in judgment, and this girl's extreme Yin physique still has some hidden problems, not being able to be detected by others, yet having nowhere to hide before the extreme Yin crown, her flaws being exposed. The Sacred Sun clan's Sunset Lord knit his brows slightly, while he very much hoped that something would happen to Broad Creed Mountain's Maiden of Extreme Yin. The current situation seemed a little strange. The other Sacred Sun clan martial practitioners also focused their attention on Feng Yunsheng. Yen Zhaoge looked calmly at Feng Yunsheng. Feeling Elder Meng's gaze, he swiveled his head to look at him, smiling. "Relax, Elder Meng, it's fine." Elder Meng swiveled his head to look at Feng Yunsheng. "Logically speaking, it is you all who are in charge of this girl's education and grooming, and this old man should not be speaking out of turn. However, the current situation really makes one feel a little uncertain. The Sacred Sun clan's Mengwan superiority is clear. Turbid Wave Pavilion's Fan Show follows closely behind, similarly outstanding. Jade Sea City's Chin Sutting similarly possesses competitiveness. The key is that this new girl of the Sacred Sun clan is actually also rather outstanding. Only the top 4 will be chosen in total. While from the looks of it, we won't be at the bottom, at the end of the day, we still have greater hopes." Elder Meng pondered as he said, "This old man is not dreaming that she will be able to obtain first place in her first extreme Yin bout. However, with the current situation, could it be that her extreme Yin physique has still not completely recovered?" Yen Zhaoge said leisurely, "Rest easy, Elder Meng. Junior apprentice Sister Feng's extreme Yin physique has long since successfully recovered. Her current state is just her adjusting herself." Oh, Elder Meng looked towards Yen Zhaoge once more. Looking at Feng Yunsheng, the corners of Yen Zhaoge's mouth revealed a hint of a smile. Under the combined effects of many methods, Junior Apprentice Sister Feng's cultivation base has improved rapidly, already successfully stepping into the late outer Aura Martial Scholar realm. Compared to Meng Wan, Fan Xiu, Chen Sutting, and the others who had previously received the help of the Extreme Yin Crown, in terms of pure speed of improvement, not only is it not slow, it is instead even faster. In terms of individual cultivation bases, she is not at a disadvantage at all. Not only has her extreme Yin power been restored, it has similarly been strengthened through many methods. The only problem is in the area of Supreme Extreme Yin arts. The Supreme Extreme Yin arts that she originally comprehended in the Sacred Sun clan now seem a little outdated, falling behind greatly when compared to Mengwan and the others. The Extreme Yin scripture has the Supreme Extreme Yin arts possessing immense power, but conversely, the difficulty in cultivating in them is also very high. Time is still too tight at the end of the day, Junior Apprentice Sister Feng lacking sufficient time to train in them. Also, these Supreme Extreme Yin arts are best used as reference. Only supreme arts that are comprehended by oneself are most suitable for oneself, Yen Zhaoge said. In my report to the clan earlier, I mentioned that in the 5th Extreme Yin bout, unless a pie falls from the heavens and one's luck is heaven-defying, it would be very hard for one to obtain first place. This is the reason why it is more used to accumulate experience as well as to fill in the gaps. However, even so, I was only joking with Junior Apprentice Sister Feng when I said that it was fine as long as she wasn't at the bottom. Yen Zhaoge said mildly, Junior Apprentice Sister Feng is very outstanding. Enveloped by the pillar of light that was bright at times whilst dim at others, Feng Yunqing's expression was calm, her gaze resolute. She abruptly let out a clear roar, resembling the roar of a dragon, piercing through the clouds and splitting rocks, her voice shaking the 9 heavens. The silhouette above her had gradually stabilized, becoming brighter and brighter. As everyone looked over, they saw that it was clearly a dragon of light that was half black, half white. The roar of the dragon grew louder and louder, causing the winds and clouds to change color. A saber in hand, a dragon of light coiled above Feng Yunqing's head, its majestic roar drawing everyone's attention. As compared to Meng Wan's graceful bearing of a phoenix, Feng Yunqing's roar of a dragon of the 9 heavens was vigorous and domineering. The mountain-splitting chisel above infinite boundless mountains Ling Hui's head shook the heavenly thunder drum above Nian Lei's head rumbling even more urgently. The massive vessel above Jade Sea City's Chun-Sutting's head shook slightly, the small umbrella above Turbid Wave Pavilion's fan show's head spinning, as a maiden of extreme in also participating in the bout for the first time. The snowy peak volcano above Yun Xiuqing's head directly erupted. We can't enter the second round. Yan Zhaoge laughed. Chapter 330. The pillar of light that enveloped Feng Yunsheng had been fluctuating between brightness and darkness, appearing very unstable. But now, as the draconic cries rang out incessantly, the pillar of light also became brighter and brighter, becoming more and more stable, no longer flickering. Not as reserved as Mengwan, Feng Yunsheng exerted force at this moment, domineering and sharp, causing the other participants of the extreme Yin bout to feel an oppressive aura. Infinite boundless mountains Ling, Hui was the first to feel this, followed closely by the heavenly thunder halls Nian Lei. Very quickly, the sacred sun clans Yun Xiuqing and Jade Sea City's Chun-Sutting also felt the surging pressure brought about by Feng Yunsheng. The pillar of light that enveloped Feng Yunsheng became brighter and brighter, and its thickness also rapidly expanded in all directions. Yun Xiuqing aside, even Chun-Sutting was overtaken by Feng Yunsheng. As the heavenly dragon roared, it soared into the sky, crushing one opponent after another and leaving them behind. Very quickly, even Turbid Wave Pavilion's fan show's expression became more serious as she looked seriously at Feng Yunsheng. Mengwan's gaze was fixed on Feng Yunsheng. A flash of light flashed in the depths of her eyes. There was joy and disappointment. The light pillar that enveloped Feng Yunsheng gradually stabilized, slightly inferior to chasing Wave Pavilion's fan show, yet having stably surpassed the sacred sun clans Yun Xiuqing and Jade Sea City's Chun-Sutting. She was ranked third amongst everyone. When the onlookers saw this, they were shocked. Others aside, to the martial practitioners of the sacred sun clan, they all found it somewhat hard to believe. Similarly participating in the extreme Yin bout for the first time, if Yun Xiuqing could be considered a secret weapon prepared by the sacred sun clan, being able to shock the world with a single brilliant feat, it would not be completely unacceptable to others. However, it was different for Feng Yunsheng. Feng Yunsheng, who had been sentenced to death by everyone in the Sacred Sun clan that year, her extreme Yin physique having been deemed useless, had actually really recovered her extreme Yin power, at the same time advancing a step further. After wasting so many years and starting over, he was actually able to reach such a level. It really shocked those who knew about it. The Sunset Lord stared fixedly at Feng Yunsheng, as if he wanted to see through her. His gaze was condensed to the point of seeming tangible, even somewhat touching the extreme Yin crown. A chill suddenly arose within the Sunset Lord's heart, knowing that it was he who had incurred the backlash of the extreme Yin crown. He hurriedly retracted his gaze, his face momentarily rather gloomy. Feng Yunsheng's outstanding performance was like a slap to the face of the Sacred Sun clan. If it was only the advancement of his martial arts cultivation and outstanding strength, although it would be embarrassing, it was still barely acceptable. However, previously, when they judged that Feng Yunsheng's extreme Yin physique was completely crippled, the group of people checked her body one after another. In the end, they all swore solemnly. Looking at it now, it seemed like a joke. All the Sacred Sun clan martial practitioners who were in the know felt a fiery pain on their faces at this moment. Elder Meng had a gratified smile on his face as he nodded repeatedly. It's not in vain. It's really not in vain. We didn't waste our efforts. He swiveled his head to look at Yan Zhaoge, saying approvingly, "Zhaoge, it's all thanks to you." Yan Zhaoge smiled. "Elder Meng overpraises me. It was all thanks to junior apprentice Sister Feng's own hard work, as well as senior apprentice Aunt Fu's guidance." These words were not entirely out of courtesy. Looking at Feng Yunsheng, Yan Zhaoge also felt emotional. Now, she had finally stood once more on this stage that she had always yearned for, making her own people happy and her enemies vexed. However, how many people knew how much effort Feng Yunxing had put in for this, how much suffering she had suffered? Other things aside, the cold marrow needles was one of the 7 great punishments alongside the soul lighting lamp. It was a cruel torture that left one unable to live or die, a vicious method that could melt even a tough man who had been tempered 100 times into molten iron. And this punishment had not just been carried out once. Ever since a year ago, it had been carried out every once in a while. Just before setting off to participate in the 5th extreme Yin bout this time, Feng Yunxing had just suffered it once more. Looking at Feng Yunxing, who was slightly inferior to Fan Xiu, Yan Zhaoge said softly to himself, "The first round can be considered a literary competition. She still has some advantages that she has yet to display. In the second round of the martial competition, it will be even more shocking. At this moment, seeing Meng Wan, Fan Xiu, and Feng Yunxing respectively ranked in the top 3, already occupying the 3 spots for advancement, Yun Xiuqing and Chen Sutting could not help but feel rather anxious. While no anxiousness could be seen on Yun Xiuqing's usually cold and expressionless face, her expression was clearly even colder, a cold light shining within her eyes. Jade Sea City's Chen Sutting's expression was grave to the extreme. She was the victor of the 2nd extreme Yin bout, also having once become the owner of the extreme Yin crown. That feeling, after having tasted it once, she hoped that it would last forever. The two began circulating their strength with all their might, communicating with the extreme Yin crown, strengthening the resonance between them and the sacred artifact, seeking to obtain more of its acknowledgement. The 2 pillars of light that enveloped them shook slightly, also beginning to gradually grow thicker, brighter. Seeing this, Meng Wan frowned slightly. The Sunset Lord's expression also changed slightly as he said in a heavy tone, "Xiuqing, don't be hasty." Before his words had landed, the tall mountain above Yun Xiuqing's head suddenly shook intensely. Yun Xiuqing's face turned slightly pale. Then she saw a crack appear at the bottom of that snowy peak that spurted flames and lava, the crack continuing upwards all the way to its peak. The next moment, the tall snowy peak began to mightily collapse and shatter. A hint of pain and unwillingness flashed through Yun Xiuqing's eyes. She knew her own matters best. She was the clearest about her own situation. Of the maidens of extreme Yin present, she was the youngest, her cultivation base the lowest. In other words, her foundation was the shallowest. While her extreme Yin power was dense and powerful, the supreme extreme Yin arts that she cultivated and also extraordinary, forcibly pushing it, squeezing out her potential, would result in her collapsing halfway through. It was not that Yun Xiuqing was unaware of the risks involved, but she still wanted to try her best. Sadly, her strides were too fast and too great, ultimately still not enough. Looking at the lowered Yun Xiuqing, Meng Wan shook her head, slightly, sighing. The Sunset Lord and the other Sacred Sun clan martial practitioners were all speechless as well. The pillar of light that enveloped Yun Xiuqing gradually dimmed, finally vanishing. The other 6 pillars of light also completely stabilized, and the first round of the extreme Yin bout thus came to an end. In the end, Feng Yunxing, Meng Wan, Fan Xiu, and Chen Sutting passed. Next, they would compete against each other until the final winner was decided. The Sunset Lord sorted out his thoughts and restrained his emotions. He turned to look at Qinglin. In the past, the second round has always been a competition between 2 people. This time, it's 4 people, and there will be 3 matches. Will the first 2 matches be based on the performance of the first round, with the first against the 4th and second against the 3rd, or will the opponents be decided by drawing lots? And Qinglin said, first against 4th, second against third. Elder Meng, the Sunset Lord, and the others all nodded in agreement. Feng Yunsheng glanced at Meng Wan, and Meng Wan looked back at her at the same time. Then, Feng Yunsheng's gaze turned to the other side, looking at her next opponent, Turbid Wave Pavilion's Fan Xiao. To be continued. Chapter 331. After the first round, based on the results, first versus fourth, second versus third, began the second round. Therefore, as the third-ranked Feng Yunsheng, her next opponent was the second-ranked Fan Xiao. Meanwhile, the other match was between Meng Wan and Jade Sea City's Chen Sutting. Feng Yunsheng and Fan Xiao first retreated from the radiance of the extreme Yin crown, leaving only Meng Wan and Chen Sutting within. Clear, silent moonlight enveloped the heavens and covered the earth, vast and boundless as it seemed to have transformed into a white sea of light at this moment. Within the faint moonlight, the figures of Meng Wan and Fan Xiao could vaguely be seen. Chen Sutting raised her right hand, forming a saber with her palm as she chopped out towards Meng Wan. Within the moonlight sea, a massive black vessel instantly appeared, riding the wind and breaking the waves, splitting apart the tides as it shot towards Meng Wan. As the massive vessel sailed, numerous waves were kicked up, obscuring the heavens and covering the earth. High up in the sky, the bright moon hung high. Within the moonlight, there seemed to be a pure white crown, emitting a faint radiance which bolstered that massive black vessel, causing its aura to grow increasingly extraordinary as it gradually filled the world before it, as though it was about to traverse the infinite sea of bitterness, arriving at the other shore. On the other side, Meng Wan's expression was tranquil, elegant, and noble. She opened her mouth, emitting a clear phoenix cry from low to high. While it was not all that majestic and domineering, it resounded throughout the entire world of moonlight at this moment. The next moment, Meng Wan's figure vanished. Then, a phoenix that was half black and half white shot into the skies from the moonlight sea, shaking the nine heavens. The phoenix soared into the skies, coiling around the bright moon in the sky. What shocked everyone was that, surrounded by the phoenix, that bright moon actually gradually shrunk. Very quickly, the bright moon that hung high up in the sky became only the size of a pearl. Yet, amidst the clear cry of that phoenix, it suddenly opened its mouth, actually swallowing the bright moon whole. Seeing this, Jade Sea City's Chen Sutting's expression instantly changed. Immediately afterwards, the phoenix descended from the skies, shooting towards the massive black vessel. The cold, silent moonlight was not blazing, yet seemed to freeze time. Dense moonlight accompanied the descent of the phoenix, locking down the massive black vessel on the sea's surface. Then, the phoenix's black and white wings flapped. The massive black vessel that had possessed a majestic, unstoppable momentum earlier instantly began tilting on the sea's surface, gradually flipping over as it finally sunk into the sea. Chen Sutting stood still, her face a little pale. The fire phoenix landed in front of her, and the black and white flames dissipated, revealing Meng Wan's figure. The bright moon that had disappeared after being swallowed by the fire phoenix had reappeared in the sky at some point in time. Meng Wan looked at Chen Sutting and said softly, "Senior Sister Chen, thank you for letting me win." Seeing Meng Wan and Chen Sutting emerge from the world of moonlight together, other than those of the Sacred Sun clan, everyone else fell silent. Everyone knew that Meng Wan was very strong and that she outshone others. But to be so strong to such an extent still made them speechless for a moment. In the first 2 or 3 extreme bouts, Chen Sutting had fought Meng Wan to a stalemate. Even if she was defeated, she would still be able to force Meng Wan to go all out. Yet now, facing Meng Wan, she had suffered a crushing defeat. The moment the fire phoenix swallowed the moon, the victor had already been decided. Meng Wan had completely left her formidable opponent in the past behind, and it was difficult for her to catch up. The face of the martial grandmaster expert leading Jade Sea City's team was sunken. To Jade Sea City, losing to others was fine, but losing to someone of the Sacred Sun clan really made them feel stifled. However, this longtime elder couldn't show it, only able to console her. The blow that Chinsutting had suffered was even greater than his. Even Turbid Wave Pavilion's pavilion lord and Qinglin appraised Meng Wan once more at this moment. She naturally had some understanding of Meng Wan, but having seen today's match, she couldn't help but value Meng Wan even more. The Sacred Sun clan's Meng Wan, in the extreme Yin bouts, was virtually like your father, Yen Di, and the current you amongst martial practitioners of the same cultivation level. Looking fixedly at Meng Wan, broad Creed Mountains, Elder Meng sighed after a while. At the peak, overlooking all life forms, a virtually unshakable dominance and sense of oppression. Hearing his words, Yen Zhaoge smiled slightly, not speaking. At this moment, within the world of moonlight, after Meng Wan and Chinsutting had retreated, Feng Yunsheng and Turbid Wave Pavilion's Fan Qiu stepped within. After the two had exchanged greetings, Fan Qiu brought her palms together before pushing them forward together. A seemingly small paper umbrella appeared within the world of moonlight, opening, flying into the air. The next moment, the scenes within the world of moonlight abruptly changed. That paper umbrella that didn't seem very big, after opening, actually seemed to obscure the entire sky. Below the umbrella was a world, while above the umbrella was yet another world. Raising her head and gazing over, Feng Yunsheng suddenly saw a dense mass of darkness before her, bright and clear, as though the moonlight that had illuminated the heavens and the earth had actually completely vanished. Even the ocean of moonlight down below seemed to be gradually dissipating. Before her, there was only boundless darkness, the darkness wanting to devour her. Outside of the world of moonlight, the scene before everyone's eyes was that the world of moonlight had suddenly split into two, the upper half still bright. While the moonlight was not blazing and piercing, it was vast and boundless, causing one's mind to involuntarily be immersed within. That bright moon still hung high up in the sky, its moonlight illuminating the paper umbrella. However, the lower half of the world was completely pitch black, not the slightest bit of light visible. An umbrella opened, resembling a heavenly canopy that obscured the sky above, causing those beneath it to be unable to see any light at all. And even outside of the world of moonlight, everyone could still vaguely feel that within the world of darkness beneath that umbrella, an aura of extreme coldness and extermination was surging. It was as though everything would be eternally sealed in ice, without any light at all, also without any heat at all, soundlessly heading towards destruction. Seeing this, Yen Zhaoge raised his brows slightly, compared to the time of the fourth extreme Yin bout. Not only has her personal cultivation base improved, her supreme extreme Yin arts have also been improved and improved a step further. If we just purely compare the power of supreme extreme Yin arts, it is not inferior to that of Meng Wan and Yun Xiuqing of the Sacred Sun clan. Seeing this scene, the expressions of those of the Sacred Sun clan also turned somewhat more solemn. Meng Wan's expression didn't change in the slightest as she only stared at that lower half of the world of moonlight, that deep darkness. Suddenly, a vigorous, tyrannical roar of a dragon resounded amidst the silent world. Within the darkness, a dragon of light that was half black, half white suddenly shot into the skies, colliding head-on with the paper umbrella from below. The paper umbrella swayed, nearly being knocked over by the light dragon. As the light dragon roared recklessly, it unceasingly collided with the paper umbrella, its momentum shocking. Above the umbrella, beneath the moonlight, Fan Qiu pursed her lips tightly, her expression solemn as never before as she also exerted her full power, locking the umbrella in place, as well as that world of darkness beneath it. entering a stalemate with the light dragon not giving it a chance to turn the tables. The light dragon's tyrannical claw directly left a few cracks on the umbrella's surface. Through the cracks, the moon descended, causing the world of darkness beneath the umbrella to instantly brighten somewhat. Bathed in the moonlight, the power of that black and white light dragon also grew stronger and stronger. Fan Xiu's extended hands pressed downwards forcefully together. The paper umbrella suddenly rotated, the force of its rotation instantly deflecting the impact of the light dragon to the side. As the moonlight descended, the cracks on the paper umbrella also began to heal. The two began an intense battle within this world of moonlight. To be continued. Chapter 332. Yan Zhaoge looked calmly at the world of moonlight. In his conversation with Elder Meng just now, there was a situation that Yan Zhaoge had actually not told Elder Meng. As the current Feng Yunsheng still had to temper the supreme extreme Yin arts that she cultivated in, she actually had a shortcoming in actual combat against other maidens of extreme Yin through the extreme Yin crown. That was, he couldn't endure a protracted battle. Only a few people knew about this matter. Yan Zhaoge and the others all kept their mouths tightly shut. In the future, with the passage of time, when the supreme extreme Yin skill was gradually perfected and practiced, this problem would no longer be a problem. However, for the current Feng Yunsheng, it was best to end the battle as soon as possible. A prolonged battle would cause her to gradually run out of strength. It just so happened that her current opponent, Turbid Wave Pavilion's Fan Xiu, no matter if it was the martial arts she cultivated in or her personal combat style, they were all the slowly grinding type. Fan Xiu did not know Feng Yunsheng's problem, but the way she fought unintentionally targeted Feng Yunsheng's shortcoming. And in terms of their current resonance with the extreme Yin crown, Fan Xiu was even somewhat superior. In this way, it would be even more difficult for Feng Yunsheng to win. Yan Zhaoge, on the other hand, was not in a rush. Having successfully entered the second round, Feng Yunsheng had already achieved her goal. He also very much wanted to see how Feng Yunsheng would act under such a disadvantageous situation. The battle was still in a stalemate. The light dragon under the umbrella was still as mighty and fierce as ever. It struck the umbrella, causing it to sway and crack after crack. However, as the paper umbrella spun, most of the light dragon's strength was dissipated. Moonlight shone down from above, and the cracks rapidly mended. The two sides fought fiercely for a long time, and the light dragon's power finally began to gradually weaken. The boundless darkness under the umbrella, the extreme cold and silence annihilated all living things. When the light dragon was at its peak, it was difficult to invade, but now it began to wear down the light dragon's power. The flashing black and white light dragon roused itself and roused its spirit. Once again, it stirred up waves and fiercely charged at the paper umbrella. The paper umbrella spun faster, trying its best to dissipate the power of the light dragon. After a few waves of attacks, Guanglong's aura dropped once more. However, Feng Yunsheng's willpower was firm, and she was extremely resilient. Even so, she still forcefully circulated her strength and refused to admit defeat. Low, rising, uncontrollably sliding down again, then trying to rise again. The light dragon rose and fell like a candle in the wind, refusing to be extinguished. But everyone could see that under Fan Xiu's stalling and grinding tactics, Feng Yunsheng's strength was gradually being drained like warm water. He kept urging his power, but after a short burst, he fell into an even deeper trough. Although it kept rising and falling, the overall trend was that the black and white light dragon's power was slowly declining. Fan Xiu's situation was not good either. She had used up a lot of energy, although the current battle style was her specialty, and also the specialty of her supreme extreme Yin skill. Feng Yunxing's explosive power was strong, and her tenacity was also extremely strong. As they continued to clash, Fan Qiu's strength fell rapidly, and she was no longer at her peak. In the end, the spinning speed of the paper umbrella had become very slow. The tears that had been torn open were no longer as fast as before. Both sides were gradually running out of energy in this protracted battle. Fan Qiu relied on her deeper foundation and her own expertise in this kind of fighting style to steadily gain the upper hand. But even if she won, it would only be a Pyrrhic victory. Looking at the unyielding light dragon amidst the darkness, Elder Meng had a worried look on his face. Don't let her become like that little miss surnamed Yun of the Sacred Sun clan. Yen Zhaoge similarly looked at the light dragon. She won't. Rest easy, Elder Meng. Looking first at Feng Yunsheng, then at the similarly exhausted Fan Qiu. Elder Meng wanted to say something, but stopped himself. Elder is worried that no matter who wins or loses, in a situation where they have expended a great deal of energy, they would be hard-pressed to deal with Meng, one who easily won the previous round. Yen Zhaoge seemed to know what Elder Meng was thinking. This way, it would be equivalent to both us and Turbid Wave Pavilion, who have no conflict with each other, suffering heavy losses, finally benefiting the enemy, the Sacred Sun clan, right? Hearing his words, Elder Meng sighed. As a martial practitioner, striving hard for victory is inevitable, whether it is for strategy or profit, giving way in a battle, life and death, victory or defeat. As long as this thought arises, it would more or less be detrimental to one's faith and will in the martial Tao. This old man naturally understands this principle and also has no intention of asking that child to give way. It's just that the current situation really makes one feel regretful. Yen Zhaoge said, I understand. Perhaps you still have some considerations in your heart. Since you can't win, why not just conserve your strength, not letting others see through your depth? This way, in the next competition, it might be a little more advantageous. Elder Meng sighed, not speaking. Yen Zhaoge said quietly, the previous question, right, to be honest, in this year's Extreme bout, actually after seeing the battle between Meng Wan and Jade Sea City's Chen Sutting just now in my eyes, the ownership of the Extreme crown has already been decided. Elder Meng swiveled his head to look at Yen Zhaoge, who nodded. Unless Meng Wan is like back then, with a major problem cropping up in her body, whether it is Junior Apprentice Sister Feng or Turbid Wave Pavilion's Junior Apprentice Sister Fan, even at their peak condition, they would also not be able to defeat Meng Wan this year. Opponent of Flowing Water, Meng Wan forged of iron. Yen Zhaoge smacked his lips. As you said earlier, Elder Meng, in the Extreme Yin bout, Meng Wan really bore some resemblance to my father when he was young on the path of the martial Tao. If it is, as you put it, Elder Meng knit his brows slightly. Gazing at the world of moonlight, Yen Zhaoge said softly, however, some paths must be walked, some things must be done. These are all paths that must be taken. Yen Zhaoge suddenly smiled slightly. In the actual process of a battle, one can be flexible and changeable, temporarily avoiding the enemy's sharpness before striking out with a surprise attack, subduing the enemy and obtaining victory. However, in a battle to fight or not to fight, sometimes there is no need to choose. Even knowing that you are not a match, you must still dare to fight. Hearing his words, Elder Meng's gaze flickered slightly as he swiveled his head to look at the world of moonlight. Then he saw that black and white light dragon, which had originally already been gradually weakening, seemingly at the end of its road, suddenly erupt with shocking power. It was even more powerful than when the battle had just begun, surpassing its previous peak state. Fan Qiu was momentarily stunned. Before this, she had also always been on guard against Feng Yunsheng holding back, preparing for a final counterattack. However, as time passed, while Feng Yunsheng had never been willing to give up, unceasingly launching counterattacks, not stopping for even a moment. The overall momentum of her continuing decline indicated that she was gradually running out of oil, imperceptibly lowering Fan Shou's expectations of her final eruption of power. That paper umbrella, having experienced countless blows while it still stood tall, it was currently already extremely weak, no longer as powerful as it had been at the start. At this moment, Feng Yunxing erupted with power that far surpassed the norm, the black and white light dragon roaring as it directly ripped the paper umbrella apart. Bathed under the moonlight, traversing the sky, the light dragon roared proudly to the 9 heavens as it arrived before Fan Xiu. Feng Yunxing's figure appeared, her face pale as paper, not a single drop of blood visible. However, her expression was calm, her gaze firm as ever, not fluctuating in the least. Junior apprentice Sister Fan, thanks for letting me win. Fan Xiu's face was similarly pale, but she still said sincerely, Senior apprentice Sister Feng, I admire you. If not for the extreme bout, I would already be dead. The sudden change in the battle situation caused everyone present to sigh in admiration. They all focused on Feng Yunxing, unable to shift their gazes away for a long time. It was the same for Elder Meng, while Yen Zhaoge said, this is also Junior Apprentice Sister Feng's final blow. If she doesn't succeed, she will perish. I'm afraid that she won't have any strength left to battle Meng Wan. However, this final match still has to be fought. As Elder Meng gazed over, Yen Zhaoge said softly, some things are very important. Junior Apprentice Sister Feng wants to personally verify them.